Close your eyes, if only in your mind, and picture a sunlit field stretching out beneath a pale blue sky. A hush falls over the crowd gathered at the edge of the track. All eyes are fixed on two figures at the starting line. One, a warrior of legend, swift, strong, radiant, with the confidence of a man who has outrun death itself. This is Achilles, the greatest of the Greek heroes, his muscles coiled like springs, his breath steady, his gaze locked on the finish, far ahead. Beside him, moving at a pace so slow it seems almost ceremonial, is a creature from another world, Antyria tortoise. Its shell worn with age, its legs barely lifting from the earth as it inches forward with quiet determination. The rules of the race are simple. The tortoise is granted a modest head start, say, 10 paces. Achilles, ever the noble competitor, agrees without hesitation. The signal is given. The tortoise plods ahead. Achilles bursts forward, a streak of motion against the stillness of the field. In moments, he reaches the spot where the tortoise began, but by then, the tortoise has moved just a little, barely a whisper of progress. Achilles presses on, closing that new gap with ease. Yet again, by the time he arrives, the tortoise has crept forward once more, and again, and again. Now, here is where something strange begins to unfold, not in the world, but in the mind. Each time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise was, the tortoise has already advanced, however slightly, so Achilles must cover that new distance. But in doing so, the tortoise moves again, and so the process repeats. There is always a gap, however small, that Achilles must close, and each time he closes it, another appears. So when, exactly, does he overtake the tortoise? Never. At least, that's what Zeno of Ilia would have you believe. Over 2,400 years ago, in a quiet coastal town in ancient Greece, a philosopher named Zeno devised this thought experiment, not to mock Achilles, nor to praise the tortoise, but to shake the very foundations of human understanding. He wasn't interested in races or speed or winners and losers. He was probing something far deeper, the nature of motion itself. And what he uncovered was not a flaw in the runner, but a fracture in logic, a paradox, so subtle and persistent that it has echoed through the centuries, whispering doubts into the ears of mathematicians, physicists, and dreamers alike. Zeno's paradox of Achilles and the tortoise is not a statement about biology or athletics. It is a riddle wrapped in reason, a logical trap designed to reveal the hidden contradictions in our everyday assumptions. We know Achilles will win. We've seen faster things overtake slower ones 1,000 times. A car passes a bicycle, a bird catches a worm. The sunrise overtakes the night. Motion is not only possible, it is constant, undeniable, woven into the fabric of existence. And yet, when we follow Zeno's reasoning step by step, each step perfectly logical, each premise seemingly sound, we arrive at a conclusion that defies all experience. Motion is impossible. How can this be? Let's walk through it slowly, as if we are Achilles himself, chasing not the tortoise, but the truth. Suppose the distance between Achilles and the tortoise begins at 10 meters. Achilles runs 10 times faster than the tortoise, so for every meter the tortoise moves, Achilles covers 10. Simple enough. But Zeno asks us to break the race down into stages. First, Achilles must reach the point where the tortoise started, the 10-meter mark. By the time he gets there, the tortoise, moving slowly but steadily, has advanced 1 meter. Now the gap is 1 meter. No problem, Achilles thinks. I'll cover that meter easily. But in the time it takes him to go that 1 meter, the tortoise moves another 10 centimeters. Achilles closes that 10-centimeter gap, but in that time, the tortoise inches forward another centimeter, then a millimeter, then a fraction of a millimeter. The distances grow smaller and smaller, but they never vanish. Each time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise is already somewhere else, and so, Zeno argues, Achilles must complete an infinite number of tasks, crossing an infinite sequence of ever smaller gaps before he can overtake the tortoise. But how can anyone complete an infinite number of tasks in finite time? It seems impossible. Therefore, Achilles never catches up. Therefore, motion is an illusion. Now, of course, this feels wrong. It contradicts everything we see and feel. But the power of the paradox lies precisely in this tension between what we observe and what we deduce, between the world as it appears and the world as logic describes it. Zeno isn't lying. He isn't joking. He is showing us that our intuition, our deep, unquestioned belief in continuity, in progress, in the simple act of moving from here to there might be built on shaky ground. What if space itself is infinitely divisible? What if between any 2 points, no matter how close, there is always another point in between, halfway, then halfway again, then half of that, and so on, without end? If that's true, then any journey, no matter how short, is composed of an infinite number of steps, and if each step takes some time, however small, then the total time should be infinite. The runner would need forever to reach the finish line, but we do reach it, every day. We walk across rooms, we drive across towns, we spin through space, on a planet hurtling around a star. We move, we arrive. So where is the error? Is it in Zeno's logic, or in our perception, or perhaps in the very nature of infinity? This is where the mind begins to waver. Infinity is not just a big number. It is a concept that defies containment. We can speak of it, write equations about it, but we cannot truly imagine it. Try to picture an endless sequence of steps, each smaller than the last, each requiring less time, but still requiring time. Can you complete them all? Can you finish what has no end? And yet, in practice, Achilles would overtake the tortoise in seconds. The infinite series of distances, 10 meters, then 1, then 0.1, then 0.01, and so on, adds up to a finite total, just a little over 11.11 meters. And if Achilles runs at a constant speed, he covers that finite distance in finite time. The infinite divisions don't stop him, they are simply part of the path. But this resolution comes not from Zeno's time, but from ours. It relies on mathematics developed centuries later, calculus limits, convergent series. Zeno didn't have these tools, he had only logic and language, and with them, he built a trap for the mind. So why did he do it? To understand Zeno, we must step back into his world. He was a student of Parmenides, a philosopher who taught a radical idea, that reality is one, unchanging, and eternal. Change, motion, multiplicity, these are illusions of the senses. True being is motionless. What is, simply is. It cannot come from nothing. It cannot become something else. It just is. Zeno's paradoxes were not idle puzzles. They were weapons, defenses of Parmenides' vision. By showing that motion leads to absurdity, Zeno hoped to prove that motion cannot be real. If logic says you can't move, but your eyes say you do, then perhaps your eyes are deceiving you, and in that, there is a kind of quiet beauty, because Zeno's paradox does not merely challenge motion, it challenges perception. It asks us to doubt the evidence of our senses, to question the reliability of time, of space, of self. It invites us to consider that the world we live in, the world of flowing rivers, of falling leaves, of racing heroes and crawling tortoises, might be a kind of dream, a story the mind tells itself to make sense of a deeper, stiller truth. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause. Soft ambient music swells gently, a slow cascade of piano notes echoing like ripples in water, then fades into silence. Now, as you rest in that quiet space between thought and sensation, consider, if motion is made of infinite steps, perhaps the problem is not with the runner but with the road. What if space itself is not what we think it is? What if it cannot be divided forever? What if there is a smallest possible distance, a fundamental pixel of reality, beyond which no step can be taken? To explore this, we must step back not in space, but in thought to the very first paradox Zeno ever proposed, a paradox even simpler, even more unsettling, than the race with the tortoise, a paradox about an arrow in flight and how, at every instant, it is not moving at all. But that is a story for the next segment. For now, let the question linger. Can a race that never begins still be one? Imagine an archer standing at the edge of a still lake, the morning mist rising like breath from the water's surface. The world is quiet, the air is crisp. In one smooth motion, the archer draws the bowstring back, aims into the distance, and releases. The arrow flies. It cuts through the air, a slender streak of wood and feather, spinning slightly as it races forward. You watch it go, swift, purposeful, inevitable. It travels across the field, arcs slightly under gravity, and finally strikes a distant target with a soft thud. Motion, in this moment, feels undeniable. The arrow was here, and now it is there. It moved. But what if I told you that, at every single instant during its flight, the arrow was not moving at all. That, in fact, it was perfectly still. This is the heart of Zeno's arrow paradox, a quiet, almost serene contradiction that slips in like a shadow beneath the brightness of certainty. It doesn't shout, it doesn't dazzle with complexity. It simply asks, what is motion, really? Let us slow time down so slowly that we can peer into the tiniest fragments of duration. Imagine freezing the arrow mid-flight, not in the way a photograph does, but in the absolute sense, a single, indivisible moment of time. In that instant, the arrow occupies a space exactly equal to itself. It is not stretching, not warping, not halfway between two places. It is simply there, in one precise location. Now, ask yourself, is it moving in that instant? Motion, by definition, involves change of position over time. But an instant has no duration. It is not a span, it is a point. And in a point of time, nothing can happen. There is no during in which movement can occur. Just as you cannot age in a single moment, the arrow cannot move in a single instant. It is, at that precise tick of the cosmic clock, at rest. If that is true for one instant, then it must be true for every instant. Time, Zeno suggests, is not a continuous flow, but a sequence of frozen moments like frames in a film strip. One captures the arrow in a fixed position. In frame 1, it's here. In frame 2, slightly further. In frame 3, a bit more. But in each individual frame, the arrow is motionless. So when, exactly, does it move? If every moment is a state of rest, then the entire journey is composed of stillness. There is no instant in which motion occurs. And if motion never happens, when it's happening, then does it happen at all? This is the paradox. Not that the arrow fails to reach its target, we see that it does. But the logical path to that outcome vanishes beneath our feet. We are left with a disquieting possibility. That motion is not a property of the world, but a construct of the mind. A story we tell ourselves to make sense of a series of static snapshots. Think of a flip book. You've seen them, small pads of paper with slightly different drawings on each page. When you flip through them quickly, a cartoon bird appears to flap its wings, or a stick figure seems to jump. But look at any single page. The bird is frozen. The figure is still. There is no motion in the images. The movement exists only in the transition between them, created by the speed of your thumb and the persistence of your vision. Is that what time is? A rapid succession of frozen realities, stitched together by consciousness into the illusion of flow. If so, then the arrow never truly flies. It simply appears, again and again, in slightly different places, like a lantern slide projected frame by frame onto the screen of existence. And if that's true for an arrow, what about everything else? Consider your own body. As you sit or lie listening to these words, you may feel still, but within you, blood flows, cells divide, neurons fire. You are in constant motion at the microscopic level. But even that motion, if broken into instants, would consist of frozen states. Each electron in each atom occupies a position at each moment. Nothing moves during the now. So are you moving? Or are you, like the arrow, a sequence of cells, each one complete, each one still flickering from one state to the next, like frames in a reel of film no one is watching? The implications ripple outward. If time is not continuous, but discrete, if it progresses in indivisible moments, like pixels in time, then the universe may operate more like a digital simulation than an analog stream. This idea, once purely philosophical, has found echoes in modern physics. Some theories of quantum gravity suggest that time may have a smallest possible unit, the Planck time, roughly 10 seconds below which the concept of before and after breaks down. In such a model, reality updates in ticks, not flows. The arrow doesn't glide. It teleports from position to position, too quickly for us to notice the gaps. And what of consciousness? If our perception of motion depends on the brain stitching together still images, much like a movie projector, then perhaps our sense of time is limited by our mental frame rate. Neurological studies suggest that human perception operates in windows of about 30 to 100 milliseconds. Events faster than that blur together. We don't see the flicker of a fluorescent light, even though it turns on and off hundreds of times per second. Similarly, we don't perceive the gaps between moments. We experience continuity where there may only be succession. So the arrow flies, not because it moves through space, but because we believe it does. Because our minds, craving narrative and cause, fill in the blanks between stillnesses with the idea of motion. But then, what is real? Zeno does not offer answers. He offers silence, a pause in the rush of things, a moment to wonder whether the world is truly unfolding or merely appearing. And in that stillness, something deeper emerges. The arrow paradox is not just about physics. It is about presence, about the nature of now. Each moment we experience is, in a way, an instant of rest, a complete universe unto itself. The past is gone. The future is not yet. Only this moment exists. And in this moment, nothing is moving. Everything simply is. The anxiety of progress, the fear of falling behind, the urgency to get somewhere, these dissolved when you realize that motion may be an illusion, and stillness the only truth. Perhaps the arrow never flies because it doesn't need to. It is already where it is meant to be, here, now, in this frame, and so are you. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, gentle breath, like rhythm in the background, slow and steady, like the tide pulling back from the shore. A single note hums softly, fading into silence. Now, as you rest in the quiet between thoughts, consider, if motion is an illusion, born of fragmented time, what of space? Is it truly continuous, or can it, too, be divided forever? Can you have a distance endlessly, or is there a smallest possible length, beyond which the universe refuses to be split? To explore this, we must return to Zeno's most fundamental paradox, one so simple it feels like a whisper, yet so profound it has haunted thinkers for millennia. A paradox not of arrows or racers, but of walking across a room, of taking a single step, and realizing you may never reach the other side. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, let the image linger, the arrow, frozen in flight, not moving, not falling, simply being perfectly still, perfectly whole, in the eternal now. Picture a quiet room at dusk. The light is soft, spilling in through a half-open window, painting long golden rectangles across the wooden floor. You stand at one end, near the door. On the opposite wall, a single book rests on a few meters away. You decide to walk over and take it down. It's a simple act, one you've performed 1,000 times without thought. You shift your weight, lift your foot, and step forward. But let's pause just for a moment and follow Zeno's gaze into the invisible architecture of that movement. To reach the book, you must first cross half the distance to it. That's the first step, not in motion, but in logic. Halfway. Simple enough. But before you can complete that half, you must first reach the halfway point of that half, a quarter of the total distance. And before you reach the quarter, you must cross half of that, an eighth, then a 16th, then a 32nd. On and on, without end. Each segment is real. Each must be traversed. And each, no matter how small, takes some time, however infinitesimal. So if every journey begins with a step, and every step can be divided into two, and those halves into halves again, ad infinitum, then every motion, no matter how brief, is composed of an endless sequence of smaller motions, an infinite number of tasks. And here lies the heart of Zeno's dichotomy, paradox. How can you ever begin a journey when there is always a smaller distance to cross first? If infinity stands between you and the next moment, how do you take the first step? It's not that you'll never finish the journey, it's that you can't even start. This is not a statement about fatigue or hesitation. It is a logical conclusion drawn from an assumption so deeply embedded in our thinking that we rarely question it. That space is continuous, that between any 2 points, no matter how close, there exists another point, that you can always go halfway. That division has no end. But what if that assumption is the source of the paradox? Imagine drawing a line on a piece of paper from point A to point B. Now mark the midpoint, then the midpoint of each half, then again, and again. You could do this forever. In theory, there's no mathematical limit to how finely you can divide a line. The real numbers are dense. Between any two, there's always another. This is the foundation of calculus, of geometry, of much of modern science. But is physical space like that line on paper? Or is it, at some unimaginably small scale, discrete, made of indivisible units, like pixels on a screen? If space is infinitely divisible, then yes, there are always smaller distances, and if each requires a moment of time to cross, then completing an infinite number of them would take infinite time. Motion becomes impossible. Achilles never starts. The arrow never leaves the bow. You never lift your foot. And yet, you do. You walk across the room. The book is in your hand. The sun moves across the sky. Galaxies spiral through the void. Motion happens, not in theory, but in fact. So where is the flaw? For centuries, this paradox haunted philosophy like a ghost in the machinery of thought. It wasn't until the development of calculus over 2,000 years after Zeno first posed the riddle that a mathematical answer emerged. The key lies, not in denying infinity, but in taming it. Consider the distances: 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, each half the size of the one before. This is an infinite series. But when you add them together, 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16 plus, the total approaches and eventually equals exactly 1, the whole distance. Mathematicians call this a convergent series. Though there are infinitely many terms, their sum is finite. And if each segment takes proportionally less time to cross, then the total time is also finite. You can cross an infinite number of intervals in a finite duration, because the intervals themselves shrink faster than time passes. In this way, mathematics resolves the paradox. You can complete an infinite number of steps because the later steps demand vanishingly small effort and time. The infinite is not an obstacle. It is folded into the finite like a spiral within a shell. But Zeno was not a mathematician, he was a philosopher. And his paradox was never meant to be solved with equations. It was meant to unsettle, to make you feel the weight of infinity pressing against the limits of the body, the mind, the moment. Because even if math tells us the sum is finite, the intuition remains. How can something endless be completed? How can you finish what has no end? This is the tension Zeno wanted us to dwell in, the gap between abstract reason and lived experience. We know we can walk across a room, but when we dissect the act, we find an abyss. Between here and there lies not just space, but eternity. And perhaps that's the deeper truth, that the human mind is uniquely capable of holding both the infinite and the finite at once. We are creatures of limits, our lives bounded by birth and death, our movements constrained by gravity and time. And yet, in thought, we soar beyond all boundaries. We conceive of endless divisions, of boundless universes, of numbers so vast they cannot be written. But we do not live in infinity. We live in moments, in steps, in breaths. So when you take that first step across the room, you are not completing an infinite series, you are transcending it. Not through calculation, but through action. Motion is not a sum of parts, it is a gesture of wholeness, a refusal to be trapped by logic. This raises a profound question. Is space actually infinitely divisible? Or is that just a feature of our mathematical models? Modern physics offers a tantalizing possibility, that space itself may have a smallest possible unit. In quantum gravity theories like loop quantum gravity, space is not smooth and continuous, but woven from tiny, discrete loops each about the size of the Planck length, roughly 10 meters. At that scale, the idea of half breaks down. You cannot go halfway, because there is no space between the pixels of reality. If that's true, then Zeno's infinite division hits a wall. There is a smallest step, a fundamental grain to the universe, and motion becomes a series of quantum leaps from one discrete location to the next, without traversing the space in between. In this view, the paradox dissolves, not because of math, but because the premise is false. Space cannot be divided forever. There is a bottom to the descent. But then, what does that mean for continuity? For the smooth flow of time and space we experience? Are we like characters in a digital simulation, moving across a grid to find, to see? Or is the continuity we feel the glide of a hand through air, the arc of a bird in flight, the true reality? And the pixelated universe, just a mathematical convenience? We may never know for certain. But the question lingers, is the world continuous, or is it made of tiny, indivisible moments of here and there? And if it is discrete, then every motion is a kind of teleportation, a jump from state to state, with nothing in between. Like frames in a film, we blink from one position to the next, too fast to notice the gaps. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, distant wind chimes, their tones soft and lingering, like echoes from another dimension. A gentle breeze stirs the silence. Now, as you rest in this space between thought and sensation, consider, if space can be divided infinitely, or nearly so, what about time? Can moments be sliced just as finely? Can we divide a second into halves, and those halves into halves again? forever? Is time, like space, a smooth river, or is it, too, a sequence of frozen instants, flickering like stars in the dark? We've seen how motion stumbles when space is fractured. But motion requires more than space. It requires time. And time, as we will discover, may be even more mysterious than the distances it measures. So let us turn now to the silent partner in every journey, the unseen current that carries us from one moment to the next. Let us step gently into the nature of time itself. Close your eyes, listen. Somewhere in the quiet, a clock ticks. Slow, steady, each beat a tiny hammer striking the silence. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound marks a moment, passing another fragment of time slipping away, never to return. We are so accustomed to this rhythm that we hardly notice it. Time flows. That's how we speak of it. We say we're running out of time, or wasting time, or killing time. We speak as if time is a river, constant, unidirectional, carrying us forward whether we wish to go or not. The past is behind us, the future ahead, and we stand in the narrow raft of the present, drifting downstream. But what if this image is false? What if time doesn't flow at all? What if the river is an illusion and the water is already still? This is the quiet revolution hidden within Zeno's paradoxes, not just a challenge to motion, but to time itself. If every moment is a frozen instant like a single frame in a film, then there is no true movement from one moment to the next. There is only a series of static states, each complete in itself. And if that's true, then time does not pass. It simply is. All of it. Imagine a film strip laid out on a table. Each frame captures a single instant, a leaf falling, a face smiling, a hand reaching. None of the images move. They are still, but when threaded through a projector and lit in rapid succession, they create the illusion of motion. The story unfolds. The characters age, the world changes. Now imagine that the entire film strip already exists, from the first frame to the last, the beginning, the middle, the end all present at once. Nothing is erased, nothing is added. The story doesn't happen. It simply exists. In this view, you are not moving through time. You are like a beam of light scanning across the film, illuminating one frame at a time. The past isn't gone. The future isn't unreal. They are just frames you haven't reached yet, or have already passed. This is what physicists call the block universe, a model in which time is not fundamentally different from space, just as all points in space exist simultaneously. So, to do all points in time, the year 1923 is not gone. The year 2098 is not unborn. They are simply located at different coordinates in the four-dimensional fabric of space-time. You, right now, are a slice of that structure, a three-dimensional cross-section of a four-dimensional being, stretching from birth to death like a long winding ribbon. And if that's true, then Zeno's paradoxes lose their sting. The arrow doesn't need to move through infinite instants because all its positions already exist. Achilles doesn't struggle to catch the tortoise. Their entire race is already inscribed in the geometry of reality. There is no process, no becoming, only being. But then, why do we feel time passing? Why does the present feel so vivid, so urgent, while the past feels like memory and the future like possibility? This is the great mystery. The block universe may be consistent with Einstein's theory of relativity, where time is relative and the distinction between past and future depends on the observer. It may be the most accurate description physics has offered, and yet, it clashes violently with our lived experience. We remember yesterday, we anticipate tomorrow, we regret, we hope, we change. These are not sensations a static universe should produce, and yet, here we are feeling time as a current, as a force, as something that carries us forward, whether we wish to go or not. So where does this feeling come from? Perhaps from the mind itself. Consciousness may not be a traveler through time, but a spotlight moving across a fixed landscape. Each moment we call now is not a point in motion, but a moment of awareness illuminated, then released. Memory gives us the impression of a past. Anticipation creates the illusion of a future. But neither may be fundamentally real. They may be stories the brain tells to make sense of a sequence it cannot perceive all at once. Neuroscience suggests that our sense of time is constructed, not given. The brain integrates sensory input over short intervals, smoothing out delays and stitching together events into a coherent narrative. What we experience as the present is actually a window of about 2 to 3 seconds, during which the Mind gathers and processes information. It's not a knife-edge moment, but a thick slice of time like a brushstroke on a canvas dot, and in that stroke, motion is born. The arrow flies. The hand moves. The breath rises and falls. Not because time flows, but because the mind assembles stillness into continuity. Think of a neon sign that flickers rapidly, spelling out a word. Individually, the lights are blinking on and off, but your brain perceives a steady message. Similarly, if time is discrete, if it progresses in tiny, divisible instants, then our perception of flow may be just another cognitive illusion, like the phi phenomenon in vision, where still images create the sensation of movement. So is time continuous or discrete? Does it flow, or is it frozen? We don't know, but the implications of each possibility are staggering. If time is continuous, then Zeno's infinite divisions return each moment, bleeding into the next, with no clear boundary between now and then. But if time is discrete, composed of indivisible quantiplank time, perhaps the smallest meaningful unit, then there is a fundamental tick to the universe. A cosmic frame rate and motion, like a digital animation, jumps from one state to the next without traversing the space between. In either case, the idea of time as a river may be nothing more than a metaphor, useful, poetic, but ultimately false. And if time doesn't flow, what becomes of free will? If the future already exists, if your next thought, your next breath, your final moment are already fixed in the structure of space-time, then are you truly choosing? Or are you merely unfolding, like a scroll being read? This is where philosophy trembles. If all time is real, then every decision you will ever make has already been made. Not by fate, not by gods, but by geometry. You are not writing your story. You are living inside a book that was finished before the first word was written, and yet you feel free. You weigh options. You hesitate. You act. The sensation of choice is undeniable. Perhaps consciousness is not the author, but the reader experiencing the story one page at a time, unable to skip ahead, believing in suspense because it cannot see the ending. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause. Soft ticking of a clock, each beat slower than the last, stretching out, fading into silence, as if time itself is dissolving. Now, as the stillness deepens, consider this. If time is static, and motion is an illusion, and the self is a sequence of frozen moments, then who is the one who hears these words? Who is the you sitting there, breathing, thinking, feeling the weight of these ideas? Is it the same you from a minute ago, from a year ago? Or are you, too, just a series of selves, each one complete, each one still passing like frames through the projector of awareness? Perhaps the answer does not lie in time or space, but in the one who perceives them, in the mind that divides the world into moments, into distances, into stories, because without a witness, what is a race? Without an observer, does the arrow fly? So let us turn inward now. Let us step away from the track, from the arrow, from the ticking clock, and enter the quiet chamber of the mind itself. For the deepest mystery may not be motion, or time, or infinity. It may be perception. And so, we journey to the next segment, the mind that divides the world. There is a quiet moment, perhaps you felt it, when the world seems to stop. Not literally, of course. The clock ticks. The wind stirs the leaves. Your breath continues, soft and rhythmic. But internally, something shifts. The usual stream of thought slows. The labels fall away. You are no longer thinking about the room, the sky, the sound of distant traffic. You are simply in it. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. The world feels whole. No divisions, no boundaries, no before and after. Just presence. It is in such moments that we glimpse a truth Zeno's paradoxes point to, though not directly, that the fractures we perceive in reality between moments, between places, between cause and effect, may not be in the world at all. They may be in the mind. Zeno's paradoxes do not occur in nature. No arrow hesitates mid-flight. No runner freezes at the starting line, paralyzed by infinite halves. The tortoise is overtaken. The journey is completed. The sun rises, as it always has. The universe moves effortlessly, continuously, without calculation. But the mind stumbles. It stumbles because it thinks in steps, in logic, in sequences. It takes the seamless flow of experience and carves it into pieces. First, this, then that, here, then there, now, then later. It measures, it divides, it counts. and in doing so, it creates a model of reality useful, practical, essential for survival, but not necessarily true. When we say Achilles must first cross half the distance, then half of the remainder, we are not describing what Achilles does. We are describing what the mind thinks about Achilles. We impose a structuring finitely divisible space, sequential tasks, logical progression onto a process that simply is. Motion happens not because a series of infinitesimal calculations are completed, but because it is the nature of things to move. The paradox arises not from the world, but from the collision between how we perceive and how we reason. The mind, in its attempt to understand motion, breaks it down into parts, but in doing so, it loses the whole. Like a biologist who dissects a bird to understand flight, only to find that the creature can no longer soar, we dismantle motion in thought, and then wonder why it no longer works. This is the essence of Zeno's genius. He didn't invent a flaw in reality. He revealed a flaw in thought. Consider how we experience a melody. When a song plays, you don't hear individual notes as separate events. You hear a flow, a contour, a feeling. The music moves through you as a unified experience. But if you pause and analyze it, this note, then that one, then the next, you can isolate each tone, measure its duration, calculate its frequency. You can divide the piece into beats, then beats into fractions, then fractions into milliseconds. And if you go far enough, you could, in theory, break the music into an infinite sequence of instants. But in doing so, you lose the music, the beauty, the emotion, the meaning. It lives, not in the parts, but in the whole. The same may be true of motion. The act of walking across a room is not a sum of microsteps. It is a gesture, a single, fluid intention made visible. Only when we think about it does it become fragmented. Only when we apply logic does infinity appear. And so, the paradox is not in the walk, it is in the thinking about the walk. This suggests something profound, that infinity, as we conceive it, may be a creation of the mind, a tool for reasoning, yes, but not a feature of the external world. We can imagine dividing a line forever. We can write equations with infinite series. We can contemplate eternity. But does the universe do this? Does it actually perform infinite operations? Or does it simply proceed, whole, undivided, unbroken? When a river flows, it does not calculate each molecule's path. When light travels, it does not check off an infinite list of points. It just goes. The continuity we observed may not be composed of infinite parts. It may be fundamentally continuous, undivided by nature, only divided by thought. In this light, Zeno's paradox becomes a mirror. It reflects not a problem with motion, but a limitation of cognition. Our minds evolved to categorize, to plan, to predict. We break time into past, present, and future so we can learn from what was and prepare for what will be. We divide space into distances so we can navigate, build, measure. These are survival tools, but they are not windows into ultimate reality. They are maps, not the territory. And like all maps, they distort. They impose linearity on what may be non-linear, discreteness on what may be continuous, causality on what may be interconnected in ways we cannot trace. The mind says, first A, then B, but the universe may say A and B, together, in a pattern too subtle for language. This raises a haunting possibility that many of the mysteries we wrestle with, the nature of time, the origin of consciousness, the paradoxes of quantum physics, may not be puzzles of the cosmos, but artifacts of our own cognition. We ask, how does the arrow move? When the more honest question might be, why does my mind insist on breaking the arrow's flight into pieces? And if thought can generate such deep confusion about something as simple as motion, what other illusions might we be living inside? Consider identity. We speak of ourselves as continuous beings. I am the same person I was yesterday. But is that true? The cells in your body replace themselves over time. Your thoughts shift. Your memories fade or distort. The you of this moment is not identical to the you of 5 years ago. And yet, the mind insists on a narrative of continuity, stitching moments into a self-penistus, then, a real entity, or a cognitive construct, like infinity, useful but not fundamentally real. Or consider free will. We feel that we choose. But if every decision arises from a cascade of prior causes, genetics, environment, unconscious impulses, then is choice an act or an afterthought, a conclusion the mind draws after the action has already begun? The feeling of agency may be as much an illusion as the flow of time, another story the mind tells to make sense of a process it did not design. Even the distinction between self and world may be a mental division. In deep meditation, in moments of awe, in the unity of love or art, people report a dissolution of boundaries, a sense of oneness with all things. In those states, there is no observer and observed, no thinker and thought, just being. It be that separation is not fundamental, but a product of perception. The mind divides. The world may not. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, a slow breath in, a longer breath out. Silence follows, deep and soft, like snow falling on a forest at night. Now, as you rest in this quiet space, consider, if the paradox lives in thought, then perhaps the resolution lies not in more thinking, but in a different kind of knowing. Logic brought us to the edge of the abyss. It showed us infinite divisions, frozen arrows, races that never begin. But logic may not be able to lead us back. Perhaps the way forward is not through analysis, but through integration. Not through breaking things down, but through letting them be. And yet, there is another path, one that does not reject logic, but transcends it. A language that can speak of infinity without being paralyzed by it. A system of thought that can summon endless series and arrive at a finite answer. That language is mathematics. While philosophy wrestled with Zeno for centuries, mathematics quietly offered a way through, not by denying the infinite, but by taming it, by showing that within the endless there can be completion. So let us turn now from the mind that divides the world to the discipline that unifies it. Let us step into the realm of numbers, limits, and convergence, where infinity meets finitude, and the race, at last, can be won. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, let the silence remain, let the divisions soften, and for just a moment, let the world be whole. Imagine a line drawn across a page 10 centimeters long. Now, mark the midpoint. You've covered half the distance. Then, go halfway again, 1/4 of the original length, then half of that, an eighth, then a 16th, a 32nd, a 64th, each step smaller than the last, each bringing you closer to the end, but never, it seems, quite arriving. Now add them up. 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16 plus 1/32 plus 1/64 plus. You can keep going forever. There is no final term. The sequence has no end. And yet, as you add each new fraction, something remarkable happens. The total gets closer and closer to 1, not 2, not 1.1, not even 1.00001. It approaches exactly 1, like a moth circling a flame, drawing nearer with every turn, never quite touching it, yet never straying. And in mathematics, we say, the sum is 1. This is the concept of a limit, one of the most profound ideas in all of human thought. It allows us to speak meaningfully about infinite processes. We don't need to complete an endless sequence to know where it leads. We can see the pattern, trace the trajectory, and say with certainty, this infinite sum converges to a finite value, in the case of Zeno's dichotomy paradox, this is the answer. Yes, Achilles must cross infinitely many intervals, half the distance, then a quarter, then an eighth, and so on. But the total distance he must cover is not infinite. It is simply the sum of that series, 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus equals 1, the whole distance. And if he moves at a constant speed, then the time it takes to cross each segment also have so. The total time is finite. 2. He doesn't need to finish an endless list of tasks. He just needs to move continuously. And in doing so, he naturally completes the infinite in the finite. This is not magic. It is calculus, the mathematics of change, developed independently by Newton and Leibniz in the 17th century. With it, we can describe motion, growth, decay, waves, orbits, the very pulse of the universe, and at its heart lies the idea that infinity, though unreachable in steps, can be approached so closely, so precisely, that the difference becomes meaningless. But let us linger in the quiet wonder of this idea. What does it mean to say that an infinite process has a finite result? Think of it like a journey toward a city you can see on the horizon. With each mile you travel, the city grows clearer. The road ahead shortens. But suppose each step you take covers only half the remaining distance. First, you go half the way. then half of what's left, then half again. You never take a full stride to the end, and technically, you never arrive, because there's always half of something left. Yet, after a few steps, you're so close that for all practical purposes, you're there. To an observer, you've reached the city. To the world, you've completed the journey. Only in the realm of pure thought does the distance remain, shrinking towards zero, but never quite touching it. Mathematics does not demand that you reach the limit in a final step. It says that as the number of steps increases without bound, the sum becomes indistinguishable from one. So indistinguishable, in fact, that we define the sum as equal to 1. This is not approximation. It is definition, a careful, rigorous agreement. We will treat the limit as the value of the infinite sum, and with that, Zeno's paradox dissolves at least in the language of numbers. But here is the deeper question. Does this mathematical resolution reflect reality, or merely reframe the illusion? Because in the real world, Achilles doesn't calculate infinite series. He doesn't think in limits or convergence. He simply runs, and he overtakes the tortoise. The mathematics describes what happens, but does it explain how? There is a gap between the abstract world of numbers and the tangible world of motion. In math, we can sum an infinite series because we operate in the realm of logic and definition. But in physics, something must happen. A particle must move, a body must cross space. And if space is continuous, then yes, there are infinitely many points between here and there. So how does nature complete what, in thought, seems endless? Perhaps nature doesn't complete it at all. Perhaps it doesn't need to. Motion may not be the execution of infinite tasks, but a fundamental property of reality like mass or charge. Things move because movement is woven into the fabric of existence. The universe doesn't add up fractions, it simply unfolds. And in that unfolding, the infinite is not a hurdle to be overcome, but a dimension to be traversed like depth in a painting, not a wall. Consider light. A photon travels from a distant star to your eye, crossing billions of miles. Along the way, it passes through infinitely many points, but it does not pause at each one. It does not process them. It simply is in motion. Its journey is not a sequence of events, but a single event in space-time, a line in the block universe. Already complete. In this view, the infinite divisions are not obstacles. They are artifacts of our perceptional, like seeing a smooth gradient, and imagining it as a staircase of tiny steps. The staircase isn't real. The gradient is. So mathematics resolves the paradox logically, but the mystery remains philosophically. How can the finite contain the infinite? We accept that a line 1 meter long contains infinitely many points. We accept that a second of time can be divided endlessly. But we also accept that we can cross the meter, live the second, drink the cup of tea in our hands. The infinite is in the finite not as a burden, but as a structure. And perhaps that is the lesson. Infinity is not something that happens over time. It is something that exists within time, within space, within a single moment. Take the present. This instant right now seems brief, fleeting. But if time is continuous, then this moment contains an infinity of sub-moments. Within the blink of an eye, there is no smallest instant. There is always a during within the now, and yet, we experience it as whole. So the mind that balks at infinite steps in a race may be failing to see that infinity is not just ahead of us, it is already here, woven into the texture of every experience. And what of the limit itself? What does it mean to approach one without ever reaching it yet, still arrive? In mathematics, we say the sum equals 1, even though no finite number of terms ever gets there. The equality is not about completion, but about proximity. After 10 terms, you're within 1,000th of 1. After 20, 1,000,000th. The remainder becomes smaller than any number you can name. So small that, in the real world, it would be lost in the jitter of atoms, the tremor of electrons, the uncertainty of measurement. In practice, you arrive. In theory, you approach, and in that delicate balance between the exact and the almost, the infinite and the tangible lies a kind of poetry, a reminder that reality may not operate in the crisp binaries of logic. It may live in the thresholds, the edges, the almost there. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause. A soft piano note sustained, resonant and warm, vibrating gently into silence, like a bell ringing in an empty cathedral. Now, as the stillness settles, consider, if mathematics can resolve Zeno's paradox, does that mean the problem is solved? Or have we simply replaced one mystery with another? Because even calculus rests on assumptions. It assumes continuity. It assumes infinity. It assumes that we can meaningfully talk about processes that never end. But what if infinity is not as solid as it seems? What if it, too, is a construct, elegant, powerful, but ultimately a story we tell to make sense of the unknown? And what if, beneath the elegant equations, there is a deeper truth, that the universe is not infinitely divisible, not continuous, not made of endless halves? What if, at the very bottom of things, reality has a grain? So let us turn now from the mathematics of the infinite to the physics of the smallest. Let us peer into the quantum realm, where the smooth lines of calculus blur into pixels of probability, and infinity itself may meet its match. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest in the quiet truth that even the endless can have an end, not because it finishes, but because it was never truly separate from the whole. Infinity. The word alone carries a weight unlike any other. It is not merely large, it is boundless, endless, without edge, without end. We use it casually. I've told you infinite times. The universe is infinite. My love is infinite. But, in truth, we cannot grasp it. Not really. The human mind evolved to count berries, track seasons, measure distance. It was not built to hold the endless. And yet, we reach for it. In Zeno's paradoxes, infinity appears quietly, almost politely. It hides in the halves, the quarters, the eighths, slipping in with each division of space. It doesn't roar. It doesn't threaten. It simply is, an endless sequence of smaller and smaller steps that Achilles must somehow complete. But this infinity, the one that lives in the continuous line from here to there, is not the only kind. In fact, it is just one face of a far stranger, more mysterious reality, because infinity is not one thing. There are infinities, and then there are infinities. This revelation came not from ancient philosophy, but from 19th century mathematics, through the mind of a man named Georg Cantor, a quiet, deeply spiritual thinker. Cantor devoted his life to understanding the infinite not as a metaphor, not as a poetic exaggeration, but as a mathematical object, something that could be studied, compared, even measured. And what he discovered shattered all intuition that there are different sizes of infinity. Yes, some infinities are larger than others. Consider the set of all whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, on and on forever. This is infinite. We call it countable infinity because, in theory, you could list them one by one, assigning each a position in the sequence. Even if it takes forever, every number will eventually appear. Now consider all the real numbers between 0 and 1, the decimals, the fractions, the irrationals like square root to halves, or pi. 4. This set is also infinite. But here's the shock. It is infinite. No matter how you try to list them, you will always miss some. There are so many that they cannot be put into a sequence. In fact, there are more numbers between 0 and 1 than there are whole numbers in the entire infinite sequence from 1 to infinity. Cantor proved this with an elegant argument called diagonalization, a logical sleight of hand that shows you can always construct a new number not on any infinite list. The infinity of the continuum, the smooth, unbroken line, is fundamentally larger than the infinity of counting. And this is the infinity at the heart of Zeno's paradox. When Achilles must cross half the distance, then a quarter, then an eighth, and so on, he isn't just dealing with a countable list of steps. He's moving through a continuum, a space so densely packed with points that between any two, no matter how close, there exists another. This is the uncountable infinity of the real line, the same infinity that makes calculus possible. Zeno's paradox so haunting. But here is the question that echoes through the silence. Does this infinity exist in the real world? Is space truly continuous? Can you, in actuality, divide a meter into halves, then quarters, then thousands, millions, billions, billions, down to 10 meters, 10, forever? Or is there a limit, a smallest possible distance, beyond which the idea of half loses meaning? Modern physics suggests the latter. In the early 20th century, physicists discovered that the universe, at its most fundamental level, is energy comes in packets, light behaves as particles, electrons occupy discrete orbits. The smooth, continuous world of classical physics gave way to a grainy, pixelated reality at the quantum scale. And with that, a radical idea emerged. Perhaps Space itself is not infinitely divisible. Enter the Planck length, approximately 1.6 times 10 meters, named after physicist Max Planck. This is not just a very small distance. It is a fundamental limit, derived from the constants of nature, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, and the reduced Planck constant. At scales smaller than the Planck length, our current laws of physics break down. Gravity becomes as strong as quantum forces. Space-time itself may lose its smoothness, dissolving into a froth of quantum fluctuations, sometimes described as space-time foam. In such a universe, there is no meaningful way to speak of distances smaller than the Planck length, not because we lack the tools, but because the concepts of here and there may cease to apply. Space, like energy or momentum, may come in indivisible units, a smaller step, a quantum of distance. If that's true, then Zeno's infinite divisions are not just impractical, they are impossible. You cannot go halfway if there is no half to go to. Motion, then, is not a smooth glide through an infinite continuum. It is a series of discrete jumps like a cursor moving across a screen, pixel by pixel. Achilles doesn't cross an endless series of intervals. He moves from one Planck segment to the next. The race is not a limit approaching completion. It is a finite sequence of finite steps. And in that view, the paradox vanishes, not through the elegance of calculus, but through the structure of reality itself. But then, what is reality, if not continuous? Our senses tell us the world is smooth, water flows, light bends, a ball rolls across the floor without stuttering. But so much of what we perceive is an average, a blur. The screen you're looking at appears continuous, but under a microscope, it's a grid of pixels. The sound of music seems fluid, but digital audio is a rapid series of samples. Continuity is often just resolution to find to see. Could the same be true of space and time? Perhaps the universe is like a high-resolution simulation so finely detailed that the gaps between its fundamental units are imperceptible. We move not through a true continuum, but through a lattice so dense it feels seamless. And if time is also quantized down to the Planck time, about 10 seconds, then every moment is a tick of the cosmic clock. The arrow doesn't fly. It appears, frame by frame, in slightly different positions. Motion is not change within time, but replacement from one instant to the next. This is not science fiction. It is a serious possibility explored in theories like loop quantum gravity and causal set theory, approaches that attempt to unify general relativity and quantum mechanics by treating spacetime as discrete, not continuous. And if they are right, then Zeno was both wrong and right. Wrong in assuming infinite, divisibility. Right, in sensing that motion is stranger than it appears. But let us pause here, in the quiet between the known and the unknowable, because even if space is discrete, the philosophical mystery remains. How do we experience continuity? Why does the world feel smooth, whole, flowing? Is it because our senses are too slow to detect the pixels? Because our brains smooth over the gaps, stitching moments into a seamless narrative, just as they do with vision and sound? Or is continuity not an illusion at all, but a deeper truth that transcends the quantum grain? Some physicists argue that space-time emerges from more fundamental entities like temperature emerges from the motion of atoms. There is no temperature for a single molecule, but for trillions, it becomes real. Similarly, smooth space and time may be large-scale approximations of a deeper discrete reality. In this view, Zeno's paradox is not about the small, it is about scale. At the human level, motion is continuous. At the quantum level, it may not be, and both can be true. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause. Low hum, like the sound of the universe breathing. A deep, resonant tone pulses gently, fading into silence. Now, as you rest in this space between thought and sensation, consider, if infinity does not exist in the physical world, what does that say about the mind that conceived it? We can imagine the endless. We can write equations that dance with infinities of different sizes. We can prove theorems about uncountable sets. And yet, we live in a finite body, on a finite planet, in a universe that may itself be finite in extent and duration. Why do we have this capacity? Is it a flaw or a cognitive overreach that leads us into paradoxes like Zeno's? Or is it a glimpse into a deeper layer of reality, where logic transcends matter? Perhaps infinity is not a description of space, but a feature. of consciousness, a tool the mind uses to touch the absolute, the eternal, the divine. But if so, then the real mystery is not whether space can be divided forever. It is why we can even ask the question. So let us turn now from the infinitesimal to the infinite, not in size, but in scope. Let us leave the quantum realm behind and lift our gaze to the stars, to the vast, expanding cosmos, where another kind of paradox awaits one, not of smallness, but of scale, of distance, of silence. Because if the universe is infinite, where is everybody? But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest. In the stillness, let the mind release its grip on the endless, and for a moment, be simply here, finite, whole, and complete. Imagine a vast stadium carved into the side of a hill, its tiers rising like stone waves beneath a pale Mediterranean sky. The air is still. No crowd gathers today. No voices echo across the stone. Instead, 3 long rows of identical figures, soldiers, perhaps statues, stand in perfect formation, aligned along parallel tracks. Row A is fixed in place, motionless against the earth. Row B begins to move slowly to the right. Row C, on the opposite side, moves with the same speed but to the left. Now, as they pass one another, something strange occurs, not in the world, but in the measurement of time. From the perspective of row A, the stationary observer, row B, takes a certain amount of time to pass a single figure in the row. The same is true for row C. Each moving row, advancing at the same speed, requires, say, 1 unit of time to glide past a single figure in the still row. But now, consider the perspective of row B as it moves to the right. It sees row A drifting to the left and row C moving in the opposite direction, approaching much faster, because row C is moving left while row B moves right. Their relative speed is double that of either one compared to the stationary row. And here lies the heart of Zeno's stadium paradox. If relative speed is doubled, then row C should pass row B in half the time it takes either to pass row A. But now, count the figures. Suppose each row has 4 figures, evenly spaced. When row B and row C begin side by side and move in opposite directions, they will eventually pass each other completely. From the viewpoint of row B, how many figures in row C pass by? All 4. And how many figures in row A pass by during the same interval? Also 4. But here's the contradiction. From the stationary frame row A, the time it takes for row B to pass for figures is twice as long as the time it takes for row B and row C to pass each other, because their relative speed is double. So the full passage between the 2 moving rows should take half the time. Yet, during that half time, 4 figures still pass by in each direction. So how can the same number of events for figures passing occur in half the time? Zeno doesn't provide an answer. He presents the contradiction and steps back. The paradox forces us to confront a disturbing possibility, that time and space are not absolute, that the measurement of duration depends on who is observing, and how they are moving. This is not merely a puzzle about soldiers on a field. It is a crack in the foundation of classical intuition, a whisper of a truth that would not be fully understood for over 2,000 years, because what Zeno has stumbled upon, in his quiet, methodical way, is the seed of relativity. In our everyday experience, we assume time flows at the same rate for everyone. We believe space is fixed, a rigid stage upon which events unfold. If 2 people watch the same race, they should agree on how long it took, how far the runners went, who, one time, we think, is universal. But the stadia paradox suggests otherwise. It shows that the rate at which events occurred, the number of figures passing, the duration of the encounter depends on relative motion. When 2 objects move in opposite directions, their relative speed increases. And if speed is distance, over time, then either distance must stretch, or time must compress. Zeno lived in a world without clocks, without precise measurement, without the mathematics of motion, and yet, with nothing but logic and imagination, he intuited that observation is not passive, that the act of measuring time is entangled with the state of the measurer. This is the essence of Einstein's special relativity, formulated in 1905. Time is not absolute. It slows down for objects in motion. Clocks on fast-moving spaceships tick slower than those on Earth. The faster you go, the more time bends. And in that bending, Zeno's paradox finds a strange resolution. In the stadium, if the rows were moving at relativistic speeds close to the speed of light, then observers in row B and row C would actually measure less time passing during their encounter than an observer in row A, not because of a flaw in counting, but because time itself flows differently for them. The number of figures passing remains the same but the duration of the event contracts. This is time dilation, and length contraction would also play a role. From the perspective of the moving rows, the distance between figures might appear shorter, allowing more events to occur in less time. So the contradiction dissolves not because Zeno was wrong, but because reality is stranger than he or anyone could have imagined. But even without relativity, the paradox stands as a challenge to the idea of absolute space and time. It asks, what does it mean to say this event took X time? X time, for whom? According to which clock? In which frame of reference? Long before Einstein, Zeno was questioning the very scaffolding of physics. And perhaps he was not just questioning motion, but the nature of measurement itself. Because to measure time, you need change, you need motion. A sundial needs the sun to move. A pendulum needs to swing. But if motion is what you're trying to measure, then you're caught in a loop. You need motion to measure motion. In the stadia paradox, time is inferred from alignment. One figure passes another. But if the rate of passing depends on relative speed, then time becomes a result of motion, not an independent backdrop. This inverts our usual understanding. We think of time as the container and motion as the content. But what if it's the other way around? What if time emerges from motion, from relationships between objects, from the dancer perspective? In modern physics, this idea resurfaces in relational theories of time like those proposed by Leibniz and later revived in quantum gravity. Time is not a fundamental dimension. It is derived from change, no time, no relative motion, no passage. So when row A stands still, and rows B and C move, the only time that exists is in their movement relative to one another. There is no true time, only relational time. And in that view, Zeno's paradox isn't a contradiction at all. It's a revelation that time is not one thing. It is many things depending on where you stand, how you move, what you use to measure. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, faint echo, like footsteps in a vast hall. A single footfall rings out, then another, softer, fading into silence, as if walking away into an endless corridor. Now, as the stillness deepens, consider, if time is relative, if it bends with motion, then what becomes of the race between Achilles and the tortoise? We began with a simple contester hero and a slow creature, a head start, an infinite series of halves. But now, the ground has shifted. Motion is not just about distance and speed. It is about perspective, about frames of reference, about the warping of time itself. What if Achilles is not just running faster, but moving through time differently? What if, from the tortoise's slow, steady crawl, Achilles' approach is not a smooth overtake, but a sudden flash appearing beside him, in an instant, as though time collapsed? Or what if, at near light speeds, Achilles' clock slows so much that, from his perspective, the race is over in a breath while centuries pass for the tortoise? The paradox of infinite steps may be resolved not by mathematics, not by discrete space, but by the very fabric of space-time bending under the weight of velocity. So let us return to the hero. Let us retrace his steps not across the stadium, but across the cosmos. Let us see how Einstein's universe rewrites the ancient race. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest in the quiet truth that even stillness is relative, that to be at rest is only to be at rest with respect to something else. And in the grand stadium of the universe, there is no fixed point, only motion, perspective, and the endless dance of observation. Imagine the race once more not on a sunlit field, but across the vast, silent curvature of space-time. The tortoise begins its slow crawl, shell glistening under the dim light of a distant star. Achilles, not merely swift, now moves at a fraction of the speed of light, so fast that the air around him shimmers, not with heat, but with the warping of reality itself. The starting signal is given. The tortoise advances at its steady pace. Achilles surges forward, vanishing into a blur of motion. But something is different now. This is no longer just a race across space. It is a journey through time *, different times *, depending on where you stand. For while Achilles races forward, his clock begins to slow, not because it is broken, not because of mechanical failure, but because time itself, according to Einstein's theory of special relativity, does not flow at the same rate for everyone. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. This is time. Dilation one of the most profound and experimentally verified truths of modern physics. From the tortoise's perspective, plodding along at a leisurely pace, time flows normally. Seconds pass, minutes, hours. As Achilles streaks across the field, the tortoise watches him close the gap, overtake, and win the race in what seems like moments. A straightforward victory, but from Achilles' own point of view, the race is over almost instantly, because as he approaches relativistic speeds, time for him stretches, slows, nearly stops. A second in his frame of reference could be years in the tortoises. The distance to the finish line contracts length contraction so that the entire course appears compressed, as if the universe itself has folded in front of him. He doesn't need to complete an infinite number of steps, because in his frame, there are far fewer steps to take. The space between him and the tortoise shrinks. The time it takes to cross it vanishes. In fact, from Achilles' perspective, he may arrive at the finish line before the tortoise has even taken its second step. And here, Zeno's paradox dissolves not through mathematics, not through discrete space, but through the malleability of reality itself. The infinite divisions of space and time, those endless halves that once threatened to trap Achilles in eternal pursuit, no longer matter, because in the relativistic world, space and time are not fixed, they are relative. They bend, stretch, and shift depending on motion, so the race is not lost to logic. It is transformed by physics. But let us go deeper. What if Achilles doesn't just move fast? What if he moves so fast that time for him nearly stops? At 99.999% the speed of light, 1 second for Achilles could be decades for the tortoise. The moment he begins to run, the tortoise ages, its shell weathers. Generations of tortoises may be born and die before Achilles even reaches the halfway point from the tortoise's perspective, and yet, for Achilles, the race is over in a heartbeat. Who, then, truly wins? The answer depends on your frame of reference. In the tortoise's world, Achilles vanishes into a streak of light, reappears at the finish line, and is gone victorious, but alien, a being who has slipped through time. In Achilles' world, the race was never a challenge. The tortoise was always already behind, frozen in slow motion, like a statue in a museum of ancient things. And in the grand space-time diagram, a map, where time is one axis and space another, their paths are not just lines. They are world lines, curves through the four-dimensional fabric of the universe. Achilles' world line is steep, nearly horizontal in space, almost flat in time. The tortoise's is shallow, creeping forward slowly across both space and time. The point where they meet, the overtaking's not a moment in time, but an event in space-time. And while all observers agree that the event happens, they disagree on when and how long it took to get there. In this light, Zeno's paradox becomes not a contradiction, but a revelation, that motion is not merely a change of position, it is a transformation of time, a renegotiation of reality. And perhaps, in some frames of reference, Achilles never catches up, not because of infinite steps, but because of gravity. If we introduce general relativity, the theory of curved space, the race can be distorted in even stranger ways. Suppose the tortoise crawls near a massive object, a black hole, or a dense star where gravity warps time. There, time slows dramatically. To a distant observer, the tortoise appears to move in slow motion, its every step stretching into eternity. Now, if Achilles stays far from the gravity well, his time flows faster. From his view, the tortoise is nearly frozen. He could circle the planet 1,000 times, age normally, and still see the tortoise only inches from the start. But from the tortoise's perspective, time flows normally. It feels itself moving. It sees Achilles as the one who blurs, who races past in a flash. And if Achilles ever approaches the gravity well, his time would slow in turn. In such a universe, the question who wins the race becomes almost meaningless. There is no universal clock, no objective timeline, only local experiences, stitched together by the geometry of space. Zeno, in his quiet way, asked how motion could begin. Einstein, over 2 millennia later, showed that the question is deeper than we knew. Motion changes time, time changes motion, And the race is not just between two beings, but between two realities. This reframes the entire paradox. Zeno assumed a fixed, absolute stage space as a grid, time as a ticking clock. But in relativity, there is no stage. There is only the dynamic interplay of observers, each carrying their own time, their own space, their own truth. So when Achilles closes the gap, he isn't just overcoming infinite divisions. He is navigating a universe where the very tools of measurement, distance, and duration are fluid, personal, relative, and in that fluidity, the paradox evaporates, because the infinite series that troubled Zeno, the 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, assumes a fixed timeline. But in relativity, time is not fixed. The rate at which Achilles crosses each interval depends on his speed, his gravitational environment, his frame of reference. The sum of the series isn't just a mathematical limitee, it's a physical process, shaped by the curvature of speciesime. In some cases, the sum is reached instantly. In others, it takes eons. But it is always finite, because the universe does not require infinite time to cross finite space. It only appears to, if you assume time is absolute. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, a single bell tone, pure and clear, ringing once, then fading slowly into silence, like a ripple disappearing into still water. Now, as the echo fades, consider, if relativity resolves the paradox by warping time, what does that say about the nature of reality? That it is not rigid, not mechanical, not clockwork. It is plastic, responsive, alive, with geometry. And yet there is another possibility. What if space-time isn't continuous at all? What if, beneath the smooth curves of relativity, there is a deeper layer, a pixelated foundation, where space and time come in tiny, indivisible chunks? Because even Einstein's elegant equations may break down at the smallest scales. At the Planck length, where quantum fluctuations churn the fabric of spacetime into foam, the idea of a smooth, curved continuum may no longer hold. In that realm, motion is not a glide, not a warp, but a jump. So let us leave the realm of stars and black holes, of speeding heroes and timeless races. Let us shrink down far beyond atoms, beyond quarks, beyond anything we can see, into the quantum realm, where the universe may not be continuous, but digital, where Achilles doesn't run, he teleports. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest in the stillness. Let the image of the race dissolve into spacetime itself. And know this, even the swiftest runner is not just moving through space and time, he is changing them. Imagine a single electron so small it defies visualization, a speck of existence more like a possibility than a thing. It rests, or rather, it might be resting, near the edge of an invisible barrier. According to classical physics, to cross that barrier, it would need enough energy to climb over like a ball rolling up a hill. But this electron doesn't have that energy. It should be trapped, and yet, in the next instant, it appears on the other side. It didn't go over, it didn't go around, it didn't move through, it tunneled. This is quantum tunneling, one of the most baffling phenomena in physics. A particle passes through a wall not by breaking it, but by being on both sides at once, until it simply is on the far side. There is no trajectory, no in-between, no motion as we understand it, just a sudden shift from here to there, without traversing the space between. And this is only the beginning. In the quantum world, motion does not happen the way it does in our everyday experience. There are no smooth paths, no continuous journeys, no halfway points to cross. Instead, particles exist in a haze of probability, out like waves, occupying multiple locations at once, flickering in and out of definite existence. They don't move from point A to point B. They cease to be in a superposition of states and appear at B without ever having been in the space between. It's as if the universe doesn't bother with the journey. It only cares about the outcome. Now, return to Zeno's paradox, the endless division of space, the infinite steps Achilles must take. At first, it seemed like a riddle about continuity. Then mathematics offered a resolution with limits. Relativity reframed it with warped time. But now, at the quantum level, the paradox may not just be resolved *, it may never have applied at all *. Because if nothing truly moves in a continuous way, then there are no infinite halves to worry about. The race isn't a sequence of microsteps. It's a series of quantum leaps, discontinuous, unpredictable. and fundamentally indivisible. At the smallest scales, reality may not be a flowing river, but a flickering light on, off so fast that it appears steady, and motion. It may be nothing more than the illusion created by these jumps, strung together by our macroscopic perception into something smooth and whole. This idea is not speculation. It is built into the mathematics of quantum mechanics. In the standard interpretation, a particle doesn't have a definite position until it is measured. Before that, it is described by a wave function, a mathematical expression that spreads across space, assigning probabilities to different locations. When an observation occurs, the wave function collapses, and the particle appears in one place. But how it got there? There is no answer. The path is not just unknown, it is undefined. Richard Feynman, one of the great physicists of the 20th century, proposed a radical way to understand this: the path integral formulation. He suggested that a particle doesn't take one path from A to B. It takes all possible paths, every conceivable route, including looping around the galaxy and coming back. Each path contributes to the final probability, like ripples overlapping in a pond. The classical path is straight line. The smooth motion is just the most probable one, but the others are real in a mathematical sense. In this view, Achilles doesn't run through infinite halves. He runs through infinite possibilities, and the one we see is simply the one that adds up to the most likely outcome. But even this doesn't imply continuous motion. It implies that motion, as we perceive it, is a statistical average, a blur of quantum events, too fine to see. And then there is the most unsettling implication of all. That observation itself changes the game. Entered the quantum Zeno effect, a phenomenon so strange it feels like magic, but so real it has been demonstrated in laboratories. The effect is named after Zeno, not because it proves his paradox, but because it echoes his logic in a new form. Here's how it works. If you observe a quantum system constantly, you can freeze it in place, prevent it from changing, prevent it from moving. Imagine an unstable particle that should decay after a short time. But if you measure it over and over again so rapidly that no time passes between observations, the particle never decays. It stays frozen in its initial state. The act of looking stops time, stops change, stops motion. Why? Because each measurement resets the system. It collapses the wave function back to the starting point, erasing the tiny probability that had begun to build toward change. It's like opening the oven every second to check if the cake is done so often that the heat never has time to work. Now, apply this to motion. Suppose you could observe an arrow not just once, but infinitely many times during its flight, each observation capturing it at a precise instant. According to the quantum Zeno effect, you could prevent it from moving at all. Watch it too closely, and it never leaves the bow. Zeno said motion is impossible because it requires infinite steps. Quantum mechanics says motion is impossible if you watch it too carefully. Reality, it seems, resists being dissected. The more you try to pin it down, the more it slips away. And so, the ancient paradox returns, not as a logical puzzle, but as a quantum truth. You cannot divide motion without destroying it. This raises a profound question. Is motion even real at the fundamental level? Or is it an emergent phenomenon, something that only appears when we step back, when we stop looking too closely, when we allow the quantum fog to blur into continuity? Think of a movie. Each frame is still, but when played at 24 frames per second, motion emerges. The brain fills in the gaps. The hand waves. The bird flies. Now imagine that the frames are not pre-recorded, but generated randomly, each one a quantum event, a collapse of probability. And yet, when viewed at the right speed, the story makes sense. Motion is born from discontinuity. This may be how the universe works. At the quantum level, everything flickers. Particles blink in and out. Fields fluctuate. Space-time itself may be frothing with virtual particles. But at our scale, trillions of these events happen every second, smoothing out into the illusion of flow. So Achilles doesn't run through infinite divisions. He jumps from one quantum state to the next, so rapidly, so seamlessly, that we see only the blur of motion. And the tortoise, it too, is not crawling. It is leaping quantum step by quantum step, across the field, unaware that it is teleporting. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause. Soft static, like distant stars whispering across the void. a low, shimmering hum, as if the universe itself is vibrating at a frequency just beyond hearing. Now, as the silence settles, consider, if observation affects motion, if the act of looking can freeze time, then what is the role of the observer? Are we merely watching the race, or are we participating in it? Because in quantum mechanics, the observer is not a passive witness. The observer is entangled with the system. The measurement changes the outcome. The question shapes the answer. So when you watch Achilles run, are you just seeing the race, or are you making it happen? Is motion not just a property of objects, but of the interaction between objects and observers? And if so, then perhaps the deepest layer of Zeno's paradox is not about space, or time, or infinity. It is about consciousness, because without someone to see the arrow fly, does it move at all? So let us turn inward now. Let us leave the quantum realm behind, because it is small, but because it is too vast, too strange, too entangled with the mind that perceives it. Let us consider not the particles, but the perceiver, because in the end, every paradox, every race, every moment of motion, passes through the same silent gate, the awareness that watches it all. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest in the stillness between the frames, in the gap between one quantum leap and the next, and know this, even when nothing seems to move, something is always happening in the silence, in the dark, in the space between thoughts. There is a moment fleeting, almost imperceptible, when you first become aware that you are thinking, not of a thought, but of the act of thinking itself. You're reading these words, and suddenly, you notice the mind that reads them, the watcher behind the eyes, the silence beneath the voice. In that instant, something shifts. The world doesn't change, but your place in it does. You are no longer just in experience. You are observing it. And this simple act be the most powerful force in the universe, because in quantum mechanics, as we've seen, the observer is not passive. The observer participates. The act of measurement collapses the wave function. The indefinite becomes definite. The possible becomes real. A particle that was spread across space suddenly appears in one place, not because it moved there, but because it was seen. Now, return to the race. Achilles draws his breath. The tortoise inches forward. The crowd holds its silence. The arrow knocks. The starting signal sounds. But what if the race does not begin until someone watches it? Not in the trivial sense of needing an audience to witness the event, but in the deeper, more unsettling sense that observation itself creates the continuity we call motion. We assume that the world unfolds whether we see it or not, that Achilles runs whether or not anyone is there to see him, that time passes, that change occurs, that the universe ticks on in the dark. But what if that assumption is flawed? Quantum theory suggests that unobserved systems exist in superposition states of potential, not actuality. A particle can be here and there, a system can be changed and unchanged. Only when observed does one outcome crystallize. And if this is true at the microscopic level, could it ripple upward? Could observation play a role in the emergence of motion, of time, of reality itself? Consider the arrow in flight. From the moment it leaves the bow to the moment it strikes the target, it traces a path through space. But if no one sees it, if no measurement is made, does it follow a path at all? According to the standard interpretation of quantum mechanics, no. There is no trajectory. There is only a wave function evolving through space, describing probabilities. The arrow is not here, then there. It is everywhere it could be, all at once, until an observation forces it to be somewhere specific. And if you were to observe it at every infinitesimal point along its journey, if you could, like Zeno, freeze time again and again, then you wouldn't just see the arrow move. You might stop it from moving at all. This is the quantum Zeno effect. Revisited not as a laboratory curiosity, but as a philosophical revelation. The act of observation interrupts the natural evolution of a system. The more frequently you look, the less it changes. Watch motion too closely, and it ceases to exist. So motion, it seems, requires not looking, requires gaps in observation, moments of uncertainty, when the universe can decide what happens next. In this light, Zeno's paradox is not a flaw in logic or a puzzle of infinity. It is a description of what happens when observation becomes infinite. When you divide time into instants and examine each one, you freeze the world. You turn flow into stillness. You make motion impossible, not because it isn't real, but because you've stopped the process that allows it to emerge. And so, the observer is not separate from the race. The observer is in it, not as a spectator, but as a participant, a co-creator. This idea has haunted physics and philosophy for decades. Does consciousness play a role in collapsing the wave function? The founders of quantum mechanics, Heisenberg, Wigner, debated it. Some, like John von Neumann and Eugene Wigner, suggested that consciousness itself might be the ultimate observer, the final point at which probability becomes reality. Wigner imagined a thought experiment. A friend, in a lab, measures a quantum system. From the friend's perspective, the result is definite. But from Wigner's perspective, outside the lab, the entire system, including his friend, is in superposition. Only when Wigner learns the result does the wave function collapse. So, whose observation counts? The paradox deepens. Is reality determined when a machine records data, when a cat sees it, when a human becomes aware? If consciousness is required, then the mind is not just a product of the brain, but a fundamental force in the unfolding of reality. And if so, then every act of perception, every glance at the sky, every breath drawn in stillness is not just receiving information, but shaping it. Now, return to motion. We perceive motion as continuous, but what if continuity is not a property of the world, but of attention? When you watch a dancer move, you don't see each muscle twitch, each micro-adjustment. You see a flow, a gesture, a story. Your mind connects the dots, fills in the gaps, creates the illusion of smoothness. Neuroscience supports this. The brain doesn't process the world in real time. It constructs time. It integrates sensory input over windows of tens to hundreds of milliseconds, smoothing out delays between sight, sound, and touch. It creates a present that never actually existed as a single moment. And in that constructed present, motion is born not from the world, but from the mind's need to make sense of it. So perhaps the arrow flies, not because it moves, but because we believe it does. Because our consciousness stitches together a series of quantum events, each one a discrete, probabilistic collapse into a narrative of motion. And if no one is there to observe it, if the forest falls and no mind is present to hear it, then there is no sound, no motion, no race. Only potential. This is not solipsism. It is not saying that nothing exists without us. It is saying that manifestation, the transition from possibility to actuality, may require a witness, not necessarily a human, but some form of interaction, of measurement, of engagement. Even in deep space, photons strike dust, electrons interact with fields, particles collide. The universe is always observing itself. But the point remains. Reality emerges through relationship, through contact, through the collapse of uncertainty into certainty. And in that process, the observer is not outside. The observer is in the system, entangled, involved. So when you watch Achilles run, you are not seeing an objective event. You are participating in its becoming. Your attention is part of the fabric of the moment. Take a moment to reflect on this *, pause, soft static, like distant stars whispering across the void. A low, shimmering hum, as if the universe itself is vibrating at a frequency just beyond hearing. Now, as the silence settles, consider, if the observer shapes reality, then what is the self? Are you the observer, or are you, too, observed? Because even your thoughts arise unbidden. Your breath continues without command. Your body moves without your permission. Who is the one who watches the watcher? In meditation, this question arises. Naturally, you sit, you breathe, you notice a thought. Then you notice that you noticed it. Then you notice that you noticed that you noticed. And in that infinite regress, the self begins to dissolve. The observer cannot observe itself without splitting like a mirror, facing a mirror, reflecting into eternity. And if the self is not a fixed point, but a processor flow of observation, then perhaps consciousness itself is not a thing, but a verb, not a watcher, but the act of watching. And in that act, motion is not just seen, it is completed, because without a mind to perceive the gap between here and there is no journey, only states. So Zeno's paradox, so ancient, so logical, so mathematically does not to space, nor time, nor infinity, but here, too, the quiet center of awareness. To the stillness in which all motion appears. And so, we turn inward once more, not to dissect, but to rest. Because the next step is not in thought, but in being. Let us consider not the mind that observes, but but the stillness from which it arises, the wisdom not of logic, but of presence. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, let the question linger. Asterisk, if no one sees the race, does it ever begin? Have you ever tried to run in a dream? Not the kind of dream where you glide effortlessly over rooftops, weightless and free, but the other kind, the one that feels real, urgent, even terrifying. You're being chased, or you're late, or someone you love is in danger. You push your legs forward, willing them to move, but they won't respond. Your feet drag as if through thick mud. You strain, sprint in place, your muscles burning with effort, yet the ground beneath you refuses to change. The hallway stretches endlessly. The door remains just out of reach. You're moving, you feel yourself moving, but you're not going anywhere. This is a common dream, so common it has a name, dream paralysis. And it is not a glitch in the mind, it is a feature. During REM rapid eye movement, sleep, the phase where most vivid dreaming occurs, the brain sends signals to the body to temporarily paralyze the muscles. This is a protective mechanism, known as REM atonia. Without it, we might act out our dreams kicking, flailing, shouting, potentially harming ourselves or others. So the body is locked in stillness, but the brain is wide awake. It simulates movement. It generates the sensation of running, flying, falling, fighting, all without a single muscle contracting. The motor cortex fires as if you were moving. The visual cortex paints the world rushing by. The vestibular system tells you you're falling, but the body lies still, chest rising and falling in slow rhythm, unaware of the chaos unfolding behind the eyes. And in this strange, suspended state, something profound happens. Asterisk, motion becomes a purely mental event. Asterisk. You're not moving, and yet you are. This is not just a curiosity of sleep, it is a window into the nature of motion itself. Because if the mind can create the full sensation of movement without any physical traversal, if it can simulate a race across a city, a leap from a cliff, a desperate sprint towards safety, all while the body remains motionless, then what does that say about motion in waking life? Could it be that all movement, even when our bodies are truly in motion, is first and foremost a story the brain tells itself? Think of it this way: when you walk across a room, your brain doesn't experience the world frame by frame, like a camera recording video. It constructs a narrative. It fills in gaps. It anticipates. It uses memory, expectation, and sensory input to generate a seamless experience of continuity. You don't feel each footfall, each shift in balance, each micro-adjustment of your spine. You feel walking a unified, fluid action. But what if that feeling is not a reflection of reality, but a simulation? One so convincing that you forget it's being generated at all. In dreams, the simulation runs without the hardware. The software executes without the body. And yet, the experience is real to the dreamer. The fear, the effort, the sense of motion, it all feels true. So true that upon waking, your heart may still race, your breath still quicken, as if you really had been running. This suggests that the feeling of motion is not dependent on motion itself. It is dependent on the brain's ability to model motion. And if the model can exist without the action, then perhaps the action is secondary. Perhaps the physical world is not the source of motion, but merely one stage among many where the mind's motion engine can play. Now, return to Zeno. In his paradox, Achilles is trapped in an infinite sequence of steps. He approaches the tortoise but never quite arrives. He is always about to catch up, but never does, at least, not within the logic of the paradox. And isn't that exactly what happens in the dream of running? You are always about to escape, about to reach the door, about to save the person calling for you, but you never do. The finish line recedes, the gap remains, the motion is endless, yet goes nowhere. The dream of motion is Zeno's paradox, made flesh, or rather, made mind. In both cases, there is effort, there is intention, there is the sensation of progress, but completion never comes. The race continues, but never ends. And perhaps that is the deeper truth, that motion, as we experience it, is not a physical fact, but a phenomenological one, something that happens not in space, but in consciousness. We don't perceive motion directly. We infer it from changing visual input, from shifts in balance, from the rhythm of our breath and heartbeat. The brain takes these fragments and weaves them into a story. I am moving from here to there. But in dreams, the same story is told. Without the input, the brain generates the plot from within. So why should waking life be any different? After all, even in the physical world, your perception of motion is delayed. Light takes time to reach your eyes. Signals travel slowly along nerves. The brain integrates information over time, smoothing out the jitter, creating a coherent present that never actually existed in real time. What you experience as now is a reconstruction, a best guess, a narrative. And motion. It is part of that narrative. So when Achilles runs, is he truly traversing space, or is the universe simply updating the story, moment by moment, and the brain believing it? Could it be that all motion, awake or asleep, is a kind of dream? Not in the sense of being unreal, but in the sense of being constructed, a shared hallucination, stabilized by the consistency of the external world. In waking life, the dream is constrained by physics, by other observers, by memory. In sleep, it is free to wander, but the machinery is the same. This idea echoes through philosophy and neuroscience. The brain is not a passive receiver of reality. It is an active predictor. It runs simulations constantly of movement, of time, of self. It doesn't wait for sensory input to decide what's happening. It guesses, and then checks. And when the guess is strong enough, when the simulation is vivid, the body responds as if it's real. That's why you can sweat in a nightmare. Why your muscles tense when you dream of falling. Why phantom limb. Patients feel pain in limbs that no longer exist. The mind doesn't need the body to feel motion. It only needs the idea of motion. And if that's true, then Zeno's paradox may not be about space or time at all. It may be about the asterisk limits of the simulation asterisk, the moment when the mind's model of motion breaks down under infinite recursion, when the story can no longer proceed because the next step is always just out of reach. In the dream, you can't run because the brain has no motor output to work with. In Zeno's race, Achilles can't finish because the logic of division never allows completion. Both are systems trapped in their own internal rules, unable to exit the loop. But here's the wonder. In waking life, we do complete the race. We cross the room, we catch the bus, we arrive, not because the infinite series is resolved in time, or because space is discrete, or because relativity warps space-time, but because the brain decides the story is over. It stops simulating the gaps, it skips the halves, it jumps to the end, and in that act of narrative closure, motion is complete. Take a moment to reflect on this. Asterisk, pause, slow, rhythmic breathing, in and out, gentle, steady, like the tide. The sound deepens, then softens, fading into silence. Asterisk now. As you rest in this quiet space between thought and sensation, consider, if motion is a story, then what is time? Because every story has a plot, a sequence, a beginning, a middle, an end. And if motion is dreamlike, then perhaps time its silent partner is too. What if time is not a river, not a dimension, not a physical force, but a narrative structure, a way for the mind to organize change, to make sense of before and after, of cause and effect? In dreams, time is fluid. Minutes stretch into hours, events loop, the past invades the future. You wake up convinced you've lived an entire day, though only 10 minutes have passed. If time can bend so easily in sleep, why do we assume it's rigid in waking life? Perhaps time, like motion, is not something that happens to us. Perhaps it is something we tell, a story. We narrate to give meaning to the flickering moments of awareness. So let us turn now from the dream of motion to the dream of time, to the silent, unfolding plot of existence. Because if motion is fictional, then what of duration? What of memory? What of the self that moves through time? But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest in the stillness. Let the dream linger, and know this, even when you are not moving, something is traveling, something is arriving, something is dreaming you. Close your eyes and imagine a book. Not one you're reading now, but a book that contains your entire life. From the first breath you took as a newborn to the final moment of your existence, every thought, every word, every heartbeat, every silent glance under a street lamp at midnight is already written, not in ink, but in the very fabric of reality. The pages are not turned, the story does not unfold. It simply is, complete, whole, unchanging. This is the essence of the block universe, a vision of time so radical, so still, that it turns our deepest intuitions upside down. In this model, past, present, and future, are not categories of time. They are locations in space-time, like points on a map. The year you were born is not gone. The day you will die is not unreal. They are both real, just as real as the chair you're sitting on, the air you're breathing, the moment you're experiencing right now. The only difference is position. You are not moving through time. You are located at a particular slice of a four-dimensional structure, an unchanging block in which all events, from the Big Bang to the last star's fading light, already exist. This is not science fiction. It is a direct consequence of Einstein's theory of relativity. In special relativity, time is not absolute. It stretches and slows depending on motion. In general relativity, gravity warps time itself. Clocks tick slower near massive objects. There is no universal now. What is present for one observer may be past or future for another. The only consistent way to describe reality is to treat time as a dimension, just like length, width, and height. Together, they form space-time, a static, unchanging geometry in which every event has its coordinates. In this view, the universe is not happening. It is. Achilles doesn't chase the tortoise. That race is not a process. It is a world line, a path through space-time, fixed and unordered. The infinite divisions Zeno described. They are not obstacles to be overcome. They are just points along a curve, already inscribed in the structure of reality. There is no need to complete an infinite number of steps, because no completion is required. The race is already over. It has always been over. Zeno's paradox doesn't get solved. It vanishes because, in the block universe, nothing ever begins or ends. Nothing moves in the way we think it does. There is no flow, no passage, no becoming, only being. This is a profoundly still universe, a silent cosmos where change is an illusion, and time is a myth of perception. And yet here you are, feeling the breath rise and fall, watching the seconds pass on the clock, remembering yesterday, dreading tomorrow. The sensation of time flowing is undeniable. So how do we reconcile the stillness of the block universe with the river of experience? The answer may lie not in physics, but in consciousness. In the block universe, now is not a feature of reality. It is a feature of awareness. Your consciousness is like a spotlight moving along a film strip, illuminating one frame at a time, but the film strip itself is already complete. Each moment, each now, is just a slice of your world line, a cross-section of your existence in space-time. You are not a point moving through time. You are a long, thin worm stretched from birth to death. Every version of you already there. The infant who cried in the hospital, the child who laughed on a swing, the adult who listens to these words, the elder who will one day close their eyes for the last time. All are equally real. All exist, but you only experience one moment at a time. Why? Because consciousness is not spread across time. It is localized. It flickers at a single point here, present like a reader whose eyes can only focus on one word at a time, even though the entire book is open before them. And in that narrow window, the illusion of flow is born. You remember the past not because it's gone, but because your current slice of consciousness is causally connected to earlier slices. You anticipate the future not because it's not yet real, but because your brain projects forward based on patterns stored in memory. The feeling of time passing is not evidence of movement, but of sequential access to a fixed structure. It's like walking through a frozen river. The water is solid, every ripple and wave locked in place, but as you move from one point to the next, it feels like the river is flowing around you. In truth, you are the one moving through a static landscape. So, too with time. The block universe does not deny your experience. It explains it. The pain of loss, the joy of reunion, the urgency of the present, they are all real, not because time flows, but because your awareness is bound to a particular point in the continuum. But then what becomes of free will? If the future already exists, then every choice you will ever make has already been made, not by fate, not by gods, but by geometry. The decision to pause this video, to keep listening, to breathe in or out, these are not open possibilities. They are fixed events in space-time, as unchangeable as the orbit of a planet. You are not writing your story. You are living inside a book that was finished before the first word was written. This is not a metaphor. It is a logical consequence of the block universe, and it is one of the most unsettling ideas in all of human thought, because we feel free, we weigh options, we hesitate, we act. The The sensation of agency is undeniable, and yet, in a universe where all time is real, freedom may be an illusion, a story the mind tells to make sense of a path it did not choose. Some philosophers argue that free will can still exist in a block universe, not as the ability to change the future, but as the ability to act according to one's nature. You are free because you are following your world line, not because you are creating it. Like a river flowing down a canyon, you move along the path carved by your history, your biology, your environment. The path was always there, but it is still yours. Others reject the block universe entirely, insisting that time must flow, that the future is open, that change is real. They argue that relativity describes measurement, not ontology, that just because clocks slow down doesn't mean time isn't passing. But the block universe remains the most consistent interpretation of Einstein's physics, and in its stillness, it offers a strange kind of peace, because if nothing ever truly changes, then nothing is ever lost. The moment you loved, the voice you miss, the version of you that still believed in magic hits, all still there. Not in memory, not in photographs, in reality, frozen in space-time, as real as the ground beneath your feet. You are not moving away from those moments. You are simply, no longer experiencing them. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, deep, resonant tone, like a bell struck in a vast cathedral. It swells, then slowly decays into silence, lingering in the air like a memory dot. Now, as the stillness settles, consider, if time is static, why do we feel it moving? Why does the present feel so vivid, so urgent? Why does the past feel like a ghost, and the future like a dream? If the block universe is true, then the flow of time must be generated within by the mind, by the brain, by the rhythm of consciousness itself. So let us turn inward once more, not to the structure of space-time, but to the ticking of the inner, clocked up to the silent mechanism that makes us feel, against all evidence, that we are moving forward, because the next mystery is not in the cosmos, it is in the breath, in the beat of the heart, in the whisper of the now. And so, we journey to the next segment, the rhythm of the present. There is a moment just before you realize you're thinking that feels like the beginning of everything, not the beginning of time, not the origin of the universe, but the beginning of this. The soft hum of awareness, the quiet recognition that you are here, now, listening, breathing, existing. This is the present. But what is it, really? We speak of the present as if it were a single, weightless instant between the past and the future, a point on the timeline. Now, but if you try to catch it, it slips away. The moment you identify it, it's gone. It becomes memory. The future rushes in to fill the gap. The present is always just arriving, and always already leaving. And yet, we feel it, we live in it. All of life unfolds within this fleeting sensation of nowness, the warmth of breath, the flicker of light, the sound of a voice in the dark. But neuroscience tells us something surprising. The present is not a point at all. It is a window, a duration, a span of time roughly 2 to 3 seconds, during which the brain gathers, integrates, and constructs a unified experience of now. This is called the specious present, a term coined by philosopher E.R. Clay and later popularized by William James. It's specious not because it's false, but because it's deceptive. It feels instantaneous, but it actually contains a stretch of time. Within this window, your brain collects sensory input from sight, sound, touch, and internal rhythms, then stitches them together into a seamless, coherent moment. It smooths out delays because light travels faster than sound, because neural signals from your toes take longer to reach your brain than those from your face. It compensates, aligns, synchronizes, and what you experience as this moment is not a snapshot, but a carefully edited collage, constructed reality, assembled in real time. Think of it like a movie frame that isn't a single instant, but a short clip, a few seconds long. Within it, motion occurs. A hand moves, a leaf falls, a word is spoken. The brain doesn't wait for each micro-event to be processed individually. It bundles them, creating the illusion of simultaneity. You hear the thunder and see the lightning as one event, even though the light arrived first. You perceive a melody as flowing, even though it's a sequence of discrete notes. In this way, the present is not something given by the universe. It is something made by the mind. And in that making, Zeno's paradox quietly dissolves. Because if the present has Duration, if it is not a point, but a span, then motion doesn't need to happen in infinitely small instants. It can happen within the now. When you watch Achilles run, you don't perceive each infinitesimal step. You don't calculate the halves and quarters. Your brain doesn't solve infinite series. It simply sees motion whole, fluid, immediate, because the entire sequence of movement is compressed into the temporal window of the present. The infinite divisions are still there, mathematically, but biologically, they vanished. The brain doesn't operate at the level of Planck time or quantum fluctuations. It operates at the rhythm of life, heartbeat, breath, the pulse of attention. And within that rhythm, motion is not a problem to be solved. It is a given, a feature of experience. This is how the paradox is resolved, not by mathematics, not by physics, but by biology. We don't traverse infinite steps because we don't experience them. We experience the result of motion, a shift from one state to another within the span of a single constructed moment. And this has profound implications. If the present is not a point, but a processor, dynamic integration of sensory data, over time, then continuity is not a property of the external world, but of neural processing. The smooth flow of time, the seamless movement of objects, the feeling that one moment leads naturally to the next, these are not reflections of an objective timeline. They are artifacts of how the brain organizes information. Even memory plays a role. The present you experience includes not just what is happening now, but echoes of the immediate past, lingering sensations, fading sounds, the tail end of a thought. And it is tinged with anticipation, the brain's best guess about what comes next, based on pattern and habit. The present, then, is not pure. It is a blend, part memory, part sensation, part prediction. It is a narrative moment, a story the brain tells itself about what is happening. And like all stories, it has a duration, too short, and it lacks coherence. Too long, and it becomes the past. The 2 to 3 second window appears to be the sweet spot, the optimal length for maintaining a sense of continuity without losing the feeling of immediacy. This window is also reflected in music, in speech, in the natural rhythms of human interaction. A musical phrase often lasts around 3 seconds, a breath in conversation, a gesture, the arc of attention. It's as if the mind has evolved to process reality in chunks like packets of data being transmitted across a network. Each packet is a now, and together they create the illusion of an unbroken stream. But what happens when this rhythm is disrupted, when the mind slows down? In moments of crisis, a car crash, a fall, a near miss, the present seems to stretch. Time slows, details become hyper-clear. The world appears to move in slow motion. You notice things you never would have seen. The texture of the air, the glint of light on glass, the precise arc of a falling object. But does time actually slow? Neuroscience suggests no. What changes is not time, but processing. In high situations, the brain goes into hyper-recording mode. It stores more information per second, more sensory details, more emotional weight. When you recall the event later, the memory is denser, richer, longer, and because it contains more data, it feels like it lasted longer. It's like watching a slow-motion replay of a football game. The action didn't happen in slow motion, but because the camera captured more frames per second, the playback can be stretched out. Your memory works the same way. More neural frames are recorded in the same objective time, so when you remember it, the subjective duration expands. In this way, the present is elastic. It can stretch or compress depending on attention, emotion, and cognitive load. Under anesthesia, it may vanish entirely. In deep meditation, it may expand into a timeless now. In flow states, it may collapse into a seamless present, where hours feel like minutes. So the now is not fixed. It is fluid, a dynamic construct, shaped by the brain's need to make sense of a world that is, at its most fundamental level, discontinuous. And in that fluidity, we find a quiet resolution to Zeno's ancient riddle. Achilles overtakes the tortoise, not because he completes an infinite series, not because space-time is curved, not because quantum jumps replace motion. He overtakes it because the brain decides the race is over. Within the span of a single present, the entire event is perceived as complete. The start, the pursuit, the overtake all are folded into a few seconds of awareness. The infinite is not traversed. It is bypassed by the mind's ability to synthesize motion into a unified experience. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, soft heartbeat, steady, slow, in and out. A single pulse, then silence, another beat, then stillness. The rhythm continues beneath the words, like the quiet engine of life. Now, as you rest in this space between breaths, consider, if the present is constructed, if time is elastic, if the now is not a point but a process, then what happens when the mind really slows down? When attention stretches so thin that seconds feel like hours? When the boundaries of the self begin to blur? When the world stops, not in reality, but in perception? Because in those rare quiet states between waking and sleep, in deep meditation, in moments of awe, the illusion of time may begin to dissolve, and we may glimpse something deeper than motion, something beyond the race. So let us turn now to the next segment, time dilation in the mind, to the way consciousness itself can stretch the present, until the infinite is no longer a paradox but a presence. But that is the journey ahead. For now, rest in the rhythm. Let the heartbeat carry you, and know this: the now you are in, this fragile, fleeting, beautifully constructed moment, is all there. There is a moment rare, sudden, unforgettable, when the world stops. You're standing in the kitchen. A glass slips from your hand, and as it falls, something shifts. The air thickens. Sound recedes. The arc of the fall stretches out, each millisecond blooming into a vast, luminous interval. You see the light catch the curve of the glass, the way it wobbles mid-air, the slow tilt as gravity takes hold. You have time to think, I could still catch it, but you don't. And when it finally shatters on the floor, the sound arrives like an afterthought, delayed, almost polite. Or perhaps it's a car skidding on ice. The steering wheel jerks, the world spins, and in that breathless second, every detail becomes hyper-real. The texture of the dashboard, the glint of frost on the windshield, the face of the passenger turning toward you, mouth open in a silent cry. It feels like minutes pass, but when it's over, you check the clock. Less than 3 seconds have gone by. This is not time travel. It is not a glitch in the universe. It is a shift in perception, a phenomenon so universal that nearly everyone who has lived through danger, awe, or deep focus has felt it. Time, in these moments, seems to slow. But does it? Or is it the mind that speeds up? Modern neuroscience suggests that what we experience as time slowing down is not a distortion of external time, but a transformation of internal recording. In moments of high emotional intensity, fear, surprise, wonder, the brain enters a state of hypervigilance. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, activates, attention narrows, sensory processing sharpens, and crucially, the brain begins to store more information per second than usual, like a camera, switching from 30 frames per second to 120. This is not conscious choice, it is survival. In a crisis, the more data the brain collects, the better it can respond, learn, and avoid future threats. So it records not just what happened, but how it happened, the sequence of events, the sensory textures, the emotional weight. Later, when you recall the memory, your mind replays this dense recording. And because there is so much information packed into a short span, the event feels longer than it was. It unfolds in slow motion in your mind's eye, not because time dilated in the world, but because your memory is playing back at normal speed, a recording that was made at high resolution. It's like watching a slow-motion replay of a football catch. The player didn't move in slow motion, but because the camera captured more frames, the playback can stretch the action. Your memory works the same way. The event didn't last longer, but it contains more. This is the true nature of time dilation in the mind, not a bending of space-time, but a thickening of experience. And in this thickening, we glimpse a profound truth. Time is not only measured by clocks, it is shaped by consciousness. Our perception of duration is elastic, stretched by fear, compressed by joy, suspended in awe. A minute waiting in line feels endless. An hour lost in music vanishes. A year of grief drags. A decade of routine blurs into nothing. Time does not flow at a constant rate. It pulses with the rhythm of attention, emotion, and meaning. And if time is this fluid in the mind, then motion so deeply tied to time must also be psychological, not just physical. Because motion is not just change of position, it is perceived change. It is the brain's interpretation of difference across time. When you see a bird fly, you don't perceive each infinitesimal shift. You perceive a trajectory, a story of movement, constructed from snapshots your brain has stitched together. But if those snapshots are taken more frequently, the story changes. The motion appears smoother, slower, more detailed now. Return to Zeno. In his paradox, Achilles can never catch the tortoise because he must complete an infinite number of steps, each one smaller than the last. But what if, in a moment of heightened awareness, each of those steps felt like an eternity? If the mind were to focus intensely on each division on the first half, then the next quarter, then the eighth, the race would stretch into infinity, not in space or time, but in subjective experience. The infinite steps wouldn't be a mathematical problem. There would be a perceptual trapper loop of attention that never releases. Conversely, if the mind is flowing, distracted, absorbed, then the entire race might pass in a blink. The infinite divisions would collapse into a single impression. Achilles won. This suggests that Zeno's paradox is not fixed in the world. It lives in the rate at which we observe, and that rate is not constant. It is governed by the mind. In deep meditation, for example, practitioners often report that time vanishes. Minutes feel like seconds, or hours pass like moments. The sense of now expands, until past and future dissolve into a timeless presence. There is no motion, no change, only being. In this state, Zeno's paradox doesn't just resolve, it becomes meaningless. There is no race, no tortoise, no Achilles, only stillness. In contrast, in states of anxiety or hyperfocus, time can feel fragmented. Each moment is scrutinized, each breath measured, each thought dissected. And in that fragmentation, the mind can recreate Zeno's logic-dividing experience into ever smaller parts, never arriving at completion. The paradox, then, is not just a riddle of motion, it is a mirror of attention, and attention, as we now know, is not passive. It is a force, a lens that shapes reality. When you focus on a single point, the breath, a flame, a thought, time slows. The present stretches, the world becomes detailed, vivid, almost unreal in its clarity. This is not illusion. It is amplified perception. The brain is not distorting reality. It is revealing layers that are always there, but usually ignored. On this way, the mind does not just perceive time, it creates it, not in the sense of fabricating it from nothing, but in the sense of selecting, emphasizing, and structuring experience. The raw data of the senses is chaotic: light, sound, pressure, temperature, arriving in a jumble. The brain organizes it into sequences. It imposes rhythm. It creates continuity. It builds the story of time. And in that story, motion is not a physical fact, but a narrative device, a way of connecting one state to the next. So when Achilles runs, he does not move through space in the way a clock measures seconds. He moves through the mind's unfolding narrative, and that narrative can be stretched or compressed at will. This has deep implications for how we understand reality. If time and motion are shaped by perception, then the world is not a fixed stage upon which events unfold. It is a dynamic interplay between the external and the internal, a dance between what is and what is noticed. Reality is not just out there, it is in here, in the quiet hum of awareness, in the rhythm of breath, in the way a single moment can feel like an vanish before you blink. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, gentle wave sound, a soft, rolling swell, like water lapping against a shore in the dark. Slow, rhythmic, calm, the sound breathes with the silence, rising and falling, then fading into stillness. Now, as the quiet deepens, consider, if the mind can stretch time, if it can dissolve motion, if it can make the infinite feel eternal, or the eternal feel instant, then what is the universe, if not a kind of thought? Not in the sense that it is unreal, but in the sense that it is participatory, shaped by the act of observation, by the rhythm of consciousness, by the way we attend to it. Perhaps the cosmos is not a machine, ticking in the dark. Perhaps it is a dream, vast, ancient, shared, dreamt by minds that are themselves made of stardust, a dream in which even the race that never ends is already over. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest in the tide. Let the waves carry you, and know this: in the mind's stillness, time does not pass, it simply is. Imagine a world not made of atoms, not woven from energy or matter, but built from pure structure, relationships, patterns, symmetries, equations. A world where the stars are not balls of burning gas, but solutions to differential equations. where the spiral of a galaxy mirrors the Fibonacci sequence, where the rhythm of a heartbeat echoes a sine wave, where motion, time, and space are not physical things, but expressions of mathematical truth. This is not poetry. This is a serious hypothesis held by some of the most rigorous minds in physics and cosmology. What if the universe is not merely described by mathematics but is mathematics? This is the radical proposition of physicist Max Tegmark, who suggests that reality, at its most fundamental level, is not matter or energy, but a mathematical structure, a vast self-consistent network of abstract relationships, of which we are a part. In this view, the physical world is not a thing that obeys math, it is math. The same way a triangle is not a drawing that follows geometric rules, but is the rule's three connected points, angles summing to 180 degrees, existing independently of paper or pencil. If this is true, then Zeno's paradox is not a flaw in logic, not a challenge to motion, not even a philosophical puzzle. It is simply a theorem true, consistent, and already resolved within the structure, because in a mathematical universe, infinity is not a threat. It is a tool, a feature, a necessary ingredient. Consider Achilles and the tortoise. In the physical world, we ask, how can he ever catch up if he must cross infinite halves? But in the mathematical universe, that question doesn't arise because the path is not a series of tasks to be completed. It is a function, a continuous curve defined by a formula. The sum of 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus is not a process. It is a value. 1. The limit is not approached. It is, and the race is not a struggle through space and time. It is a truth, like 2 plus 2 equals 4, eternal, unchanging, self-evident within the system. Motion, then, is not something that happens. It is something that is. Achilles overtakes the tortoise, not because he runs fast, but because the mathematical structure contains a solution where his world line intersects the tortoise's at a specific point in space-time. There is no effort, no infinite division, no paradox, just existence structured, coherent, inevitable, and this reframes everything. If the universe is a mathematical object, then every particle, every force, every thought, every moment of stillness or motion is part of a vast unchanging equation. The Big Bang is not an event in time, it is a boundary condition. Consciousness is not an accident of biology, it is a self-aware substructure within the whole, like a fractal that, at a certain scale, begins to reflect upon itself. In this view, we are not merely in the universe, we are in the math, not observers of the equation. We are the equation. This idea, called the mathematical universe hypothesis, is not new in spirit. It echoes Pythagoras, who believed all is number. It resonates with Galileo, who said the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. It aligns with Einstein, who marveled that the universe is comprehensible at all, implying that it must conform to logical mathematical laws. But Tegmark takes it further. He suggests that all mathematical structures exist physically, that every consistent set of equations, whether they describe a universe like ours, or one with 5 dimensions, or no time, or infinite speed, is a real universe, somewhere, in the multiverse of mathematical possibility, and we happen to be self-aware patterns within one of them. Now, consider the implications for Zeno. In this framework, his paradox isn't a contradiction between logic and reality, it's a revelation of their unity. The infinite divisions aren't obstacles, they are the definition of continuity. The fact that you can divide a line forever isn't a problem, it's what makes it a line. And the fact that the sum of those divisions converges, that's not a trick of calculus, it's a feature of the structure. In a mathematical universe, nothing ever happens in the way we think. There is no unfolding, no becoming, no flow, just eternal truth. The entire history of the cosmos, the first quantum fluctuation to the last fading photonies, not a story, it is a shape, a four-dimensional manifold, a solution to a field equation, a single static object in the realm of mathematical forms, and we are bodies, our thoughts, our memories of childhood, our dreams of the future, are just threads woven into that shape. You are not moving through time, you are a curve in space-time. Your life is not a sequence of events, it is a geometric object, and the race that never ends. It ended before it began, because in mathematics, there is no before, there is only is, now. This may sound abstract, cold even. A universe of equations feels distant. impersonal. But consider, if reality is mathematical, then it is also perfectly rational, consistent, predictable, not because it follows rules, but because it is the rules, and in that there is a kind of beauty, the same beauty you feel when you see a perfect proof, elegant, inevitable, breathtaking in its simplicity, or when you hear a piece of music that feels like it was discovered, not composed, because its harmonies follow the natural ratios of sound waves. The universe, in this view, is not random, it is not chaotic, it is not arbitrary, it is inevitable, and we fragile, fleeting, conscious beings are not accidents. We are necessary, because if the mathematical structure contains the conditions for self-aware substructures, then consciousness must emerge, not by chance, but by necessity, like the number pi emerging from the ratio of circumference to diameter, universal, hidden in the geometry. So Zeno's paradox, which once seemed to trap motion in infinite division, now becomes a gateway. It shows us that the infinite is not our enemy, it is our home. The mind that recoils at infinity, the mind that says, how can you ever finish what has no end? Is a mind still rooted in time, in effort, in process. But in the mathematical universe there is no effort, there is only truth, and truth does not need to be completed, it simply is. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, crystalline, tones, shimmering, like light refracting through ice, or stars vibrating in deep space. A high, pure frequency hums gently, then dissolves into silence, leaving a resonance in the air, as if the universe itself is singing a single, sustained note. Now, as the stillness returns, consider, if the universe is a mathematical structure, then who or what is perceiving it? Who is doing the calculating? Who is aware of the equation? Because math, by itself, is silent. An equation on a page does not know itself. A triangle does not marvel at its angles. And yet, here we are, wondering, feeling the weight of the infinite. If the universe is math, then consciousness must be a self-referential loop within it, a part of the structure that can reflect upon the whole, like a mirror that, after billions of years of cosmic evolution, finally turns and sees itself. But then what is the source of that awareness? Is it generated by the math, or is it fundamental? Is the universe not just a mathematical idea, but a thought, a single, vast, eternal contemplation? And if so, then perhaps the race was never about motion, it was about understanding. So let us turn now from the structure of reality to the mind that perceives it, not as a separate observer, but as a reflection within the whole, because the next question is not about equations, it is about awareness, and the mystery of who or what is listening. But that is the journey of the next segment. For now, rest in the silence. After the tone, let the math dissolve, and simply be within the pattern, within the idea, within the infinite that is already whole. Long before science measured the stars, before mathematics mapped the heavens, before clocks divided the day into equal parts, there was a man who walked in stillness. His name was Parmenides. He lived in the 5th century BCE, in the ancient Greek city of Ilia, on the sun-drenched coast of southern Italy. He was not a scientist, not a mathematician, not a poet, though his ideas would be sung in verse. He was a philosopher, a seeker of truth, and what he claimed was so radical, so contrary to everything we see and feel, that it has echoed through the corridors of thought for over 2,000 years. He said, "Nothing changes, not in the way we think." He said, "Motion is an illusion." He said, "The world is one, unmoving, eternal, whole." And Zeno, his student, his defender, his loyal voice, did not invent his paradoxes to confuse. He crafted them like arrows, sharpened by logic, aimed at the heart of common sense. They were not riddles for idle minds. They were weapons meant to wound the illusion of change, to reveal the fragility of the senses, to defend a silent, unshakable truth. To understand Zeno's paradoxes fully, we must return to this origin, not to calculus, not to relativity, not to quantum mechanics, but to philosophy, to the bold assertion that reality, as we perceive it, is false. Parmenides began with a simple principle. What is, what is not, is not. From this, he built a fortress of logic. If something comes into being, it must come from something or from nothing. But nothing cannot produce something. That would be absurd. And if it comes from something, then it already existed in some form. Therefore, True change, true becoming is impossible. If the world were truly changing, then at some point, what is must have not been. But that violates the law of non-contradiction. A thing cannot both exist and not exist. Therefore, the world does not change. It only appears to motion. It cannot happen. For a thing to move, it must leave where it is and go where it is not. But where it is not. It has no being. So how can it go there? How can what is move into what is not? Parmenides concluded, the universe is a single, indivisible, unchanging sphere of being. There is no void, no time, no motion, no birth, no death, only eternal presence. This is not a description of the world we see. It is a denial of it, and yet, it is not madness. It is pure logic carried to its ultimate conclusion. Zeno's paradoxes were never meant to stand alone. They were reductio ad absurdum arguments. Assume motion is real, and you are led to contradiction. Therefore, motion cannot be real. The race between Achilles and the tortoise is not about speed. It is a trap for the mind. It shows that if motion exists, then Achilles must complete an infinite number of tasks, something impossible. Therefore, motion must be an illusion. The arrow in flight is not moving, because at each instant it occupies a space equal to itself. There is no during in which motion occurs. Therefore, it is always at rest. The dichotomy of space. You cannot cross a room because you must first cross half, then half of that, infinitely. No journey can begin. Therefore, motion is impossible. Each paradox is a door locked from the inside, bolted shut by reason. N. Behind all of them stands Parmenides, silent, unmoving, certain. In this vision, the universe is not a dynamic, evolving story. It is a single, eternal fact. Like a perfect sphere, it has no parts, no edges, no before or after. Time does not pass. Events do not unfold. There is only is. And in that stillness, everything is whole. Now, this is not science. It does not predict eclipses. It does not explain gravity. It cannot be tested in a lab. It is metaphysics, the study of what lies beyond the physical. A vision of reality not as process, but as presence. And yet, in its silence, it holds a strange, unsettling power. Because if Parmenides is right, then everything we decay, love, loss, the turning of the seasons, the beat of the heart is not truth. It is appearance, like waves on the ocean, rising and falling. We are caught in the surface motion, blind to the deep stillness beneath. We live in doxa opinion, illusion, while aletheia, truth, remains hidden. And Zeno's paradoxes are not failures of logic. They are successes. They do not fail to explain motion. They succeed in destroying it, because in a world where logic and sensation contradict, Parmenides would say, trust logic. The senses deceive. They are limited, fragile, subject to error. But reason, pure, unyielding, silent reason, is divine. This is the silent God of logic, not a being, but a principle. A presence that speaks not in words, but in necessity, in consistency, in the ironclad structure of thought. And in that presence, there is no race, there is no tortoise, there is no Achilles, there is no starting line, no finish, no breath, no effort. There is only the one. Unmoved, unmoving, complete. Now this may seem alien and human. Even, how can we deny the evidence of our eyes? How can we say the child does not grow? The river does not flow, the stars do not move. But consider, every moment you experience as now is already gone. The past is not real. The future is not real. Only the present is real. But the present has no duration. It is a point, infinitely thin. So how can anything happen in it? And if all moments are equally real, if the block universe is true, if time is a dimension, then nothing moves through time. It simply is across it. Parmenides, in his way, anticipated this. He did not need relativity or quantum mechanics. He needed only logic. And in that logic, he found peace. Because if nothing changes, then nothing is lost. The loved one who died, still present in the eternal now. The version of you that was innocent, unbroken, full of hope, not gone. The future, you fear, already here. There is no decay, no death, no separation, only the illusion of time. And in that, a kind of immortality, not of the soul, but of being, not of survival, but of isness. This is not nihilism. It is the opposite. It is a radical affirmation. All is real. All is one. All is now. Asterisk. We suffer not because things change. We suffer because we believe they do. We cling. We mourn. We fear. But in the stillness of Parmenides' truth, there is no need to hold on, because nothing ever slips away. Take a moment to reflect on this. Asterisk. Pause. Long silence. 10 seconds. No music. No breath. No sound. Just stillness. A void, not empty, but full. A silence that listens. Asterisk. Now, as the quiet settles into your bones, consider, if the race never begins, if motion is illusion, if all is one and eternal, then what is the point of asking? Why unravel the paradox? Why run the race in thought, if it never happened? Perhaps the deepest answer is not in motion, not in logic, not in math, but in stillness, in the space between thoughts, in the awareness that watches the mind race endlessly through infinite halves while the world, in truth, does not move. So, let us turn now from the logic of the mind to the silence of being. To the peace that comes not from solving the paradox, but from releasing it, because the next segment is not about thought. It is about rest. And the wisdom of not moving. But that is the journey ahead. For now, remain here, in the quiet, in the one, in the truth that needs no proof and needs no race. There is a kind of stillness that does not come from silence alone. It is not the quiet of an empty room, nor the hush between heartbeats, nor the pause before a word is spoken. It is deeper. It is not the absence of sound, but the absence of effort, a release so complete it feels like falling not downward, but into it, is the stillness of sitting, not sleeping, not thinking, not waiting, just being. In meditation, this stillness is not achieved. It is uncovered, like peeling back layers of noise, the hum of memory, the buzz of anticipation, the endless loop of I should, I must, I am not enough, until beneath it all, something simple remains, awareness, not of anything in particular, but of being aware, and in that space, motion begins to dissolve. Not the motion of the body, though that may slow, breath deepening, muscles softening, but the motion of the mind, the constant travel, from past to future, from regret to worry, from one thought to the next. We live as if we are always on our way somewhere, always becoming, always chasing. Even at rest, the mind races like Achilles, forever closing gaps that never quite vanish. But in stillness, the race loses its urgency, because what if you are not behind? What if you were never late? What if the finish line was never real? Many spiritual traditions, Buddhist, Advaita, Vedanta, Christian, mysticism, Sufism speak of a truth not found in movement, but in presence, not in doing, but in being, not in becoming who you are meant to be, but in recognizing that you already are. The self is not a traveler through time. It is the space in which time appears, like the sky that holds the clouds, but is not the clouds. You are not your thoughts, your memories, your desires. You are the awareness in which they arise and pass. And that awareness does not move, it does not age, it does not fall behind, it simply is. This is the quiet answer to Zeno's paradox. Not in mathematics, not in physics, not in logic, but in surrender, because the paradox only holds power when we believe in the race. When we accept the premise, I must move, I must progress, I must arrive, but what if the need to move is the illusion? What if the divisions of space, the infinite steps, the head start, the tortoise, Achilles, all of it is a story the mind tells to justify its own restlessness? In deep meditation, this story begins to fade. You sit with you, breathe. You notice a thought, I should be doing something. Then another, am I making progress? Then another, when will I get there? And slowly, you begin to see them for what they are, not truths, but habits, mental reflexes, patterns of survival that once helped you navigate the world, but now keep you trapped in a loop of striving. And then perhaps there is a moment when the next thought doesn't come, not because you stopped it, because it didn't arise. And in that gap, there is no race. No distance to cross, no halves to divide, just stillness. And in that stillness, a quiet revelation, you are already here, not in the future, not when you finish the race, not when you catch up, not when you finally arrive at peace, at success, at love. You are already here, and here is not a point on a path, here is the whole. This is what the mystics mean when they say, the kingdom is within you, not that it is hidden in your heart or your soul, but that it is what you are, not something to reach, but something to recognize. Zeno's paradox, in this light, becomes not a riddle to solve, but a mirror to stillness. It shows us how the mind divides, how it fragments, how it creates endless tasks where none are needed. It reveals the futility of trying to think your way to wholeness, because wholeness is not the sum of parts. It is prior to division. You do not become whole by completing infinite steps. You are whole by stopping, by letting go, by realizing that the journey was never necessary. The tortoise and Achilles both are illusions, one slow, one fast, both racing toward a finish that does not exist. One represents effort, the other grace, but both are trapped in time. Both believe in motion. Both are caught in the dream of becoming. The one who wins is not the fastest, it is the one who stops running, and in that stopping, finds that they were never behind. There is a story, ancient and quiet, of a monk who walked for years in search of enlightenment. He climbed mountains, crossed deserts, studied with masters. One day, exhausted, he returned to his teacher and said, "I have searched everywhere. Where is the truth?" The teacher smiled and said, "It is not far. It is where you left it." The monk sat down, and in that moment he remembered he had been carrying it all along. This is the wisdom of stillness, that what you seek is not ahead of you, it is beneath you. It is the ground on which you stand. It is the breath that comes without effort. It is the awareness that watches the mind, race and does not race with it. And so, the paradox dissolves, not because space is discrete, not because time is relative, not because the sum cog is. It dissolves because you stop trying to solve it, because in stillness, there is no need. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, soft chime, pure and clear, like a single drop of water falling into a deep pool. It rings once, then fades into silence, lingering in the air like a memory. Now, as the echo vanishes, consider, if the race was never real, then where do we go from here? Not forward, not backward, but in to the beginning, not as a point in time, but as a state of being, to the moment before the first step, before the division, before the thought, before the race, a place not of motion, but of origin. And so we return, not to the start, but to the beginning, a beginning that never ended, a stillness that was always here, waiting, not for you to arrive, but for you to stop and simply be. There is a certain kind of dream in which you are running, but the path ahead never changes. The trees, the road, the horizon all remain the same. You move, yet the world stays fixed. You feel the rhythm of your breath, the pounding of your feet, the pull of your muscles. And yet, no matter how far you go, you do not arrive. You are not lost. You are not stuck. You are simply in motion, not toward a destination, but within a cycle. And then, in a quiet moment of awareness within the dream, you realize you were never meant to arrive. You were meant to be the motion. This is the heart of the circle, shape that holds no beginning and no end. Unlike a straight line, which promises progress, which tempts us with the illusion of arrival, the circle does not lead forward. It leads around, it returns, but not to the same place. Each time you complete the loop, you are slightly different. The light has changed, your breath has deepened, your understanding has shifted. The circle is not repetition, it is return, with transformation. And so it is with Zeno's paradox. We have walked through its many doors, through infinite divisions, through relativity, through quantum leaps, through the stillness of the observer, through the dream of motion and the block of time. We have sought resolution in mathematics, in physics, in philosophy, in silence. And yet, the paradox remains, not as a failure, but as a companion, because Zeno's paradox was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be lived. It loops, it circles, it returns us again and again to the same question. How does motion happen? But each time we return, we are not the same. We carry with us the weight of what we have seen, the infinite in the finite, the stillness in the movement, the mind that divides and the awareness that rests. And so, the paradox deepens, not because it grows more complex, but because we grow more aware. Perhaps the race was never linear. Perhaps Achilles was never chasing the tortoise across a straight track. Perhaps the race was always inward, not toward a finish line, but toward understanding. And the infinite divisions, the halves, the quarters, the eighths are not obstacles. They are not delays. They are not illusions. They are the texture of motion, the grain of reality. the way the universe whispers its secrets, not in grand revelations, but in the quiet detail of each step. Think of a seashell, its spiral unfolding from center to edge, each curve a perfect ratio of the one before. It does not rush, it does not skip. It follows the path of infinite proportion, growing not by leaps, but by subtle, continuous refinement. The spiral does not resist its own complexity. It is the complexity. So too with motion. We have spent centuries trying to escape the infinite through limits, through quanta, through relativity. We have said, motion is possible because the infinite sum converges, because space is discrete, because time bends, and these are beautiful truths. But what if motion is possible not, despite the infinite, but because of it? What if the reason Achilles overtakes the tortoise is not because he bypasses the infinite divisions, but because he lives them, not all at once, not in thought, but in the seamless flow of being? Each infinitesimal step is not a task to complete, but a note in a song, a brushstroke on a canvas, a breath in a long meditation. The journey is not diminished by its smallness. It is made of its smallness, and in that there is beauty, not the beauty of victory, of speed, of triumph, but the beauty of attention, the beauty of presence in the smallest moment, the beauty of walking not to arrive, but to feel the ground beneath your feet. This reframes the entire paradox. Zeno does not deny motion, he reveals its depth. He shows us that to move is not to cross space, but to enter it, to touch it, to inhabit it, fully, completely, down to its finest grain. And in that inhabitation, the infinite is not a threat, it is an invitation. To slow down, to notice, to dwell, in a world obsessed with speed, with faster computers, quicker answers, instant results. Zeno's paradox stands as a quiet rebellion. It says, stop, look, this step matters, this breath matters, this instant, though it contains infinite subinstance, is whole, and perhaps motion is not about reaching a goal at all. Perhaps it is about the act of moving itself, like a dancer who does not dance to reach the end of the music, but to be in the rhythm, in the gesture, in the breath between steps, like a monk who walks in circles not to get anywhere, but to stay present, like a child who runs not to win, but because running feels like flying. The race that never ends may not be a curse. It may be a blessing, because if the race never ends, then it is always happening. It is not confined to a track, to a moment, to a lifetime. It is ongoing, it is eternal, and we are always in it, not as competitors, but as participants, in the endless unfolding of now. There is a tradition in some contemplative practices of walking in a circle, not as a way to go nowhere, but as a way to go everywhere. With each step, you return, but the center shifts, the perspective changes, the light moves, the mind settles, the self dissolves, and in that circular motion, time stops trying to carry you forward, and instead, lets you be. In this way, Zeno's paradox becomes not a trap, but a ritual, a sacred geometry, a mandala, of thought and motion, and the infinite divisions are not the problem, they are the path, each one a threshold, each one a doorway, each one a chance to be present. Take a moment to reflect on this. Pause, slow, circular melody, a gentle repeating sequence of notes, like a music box winding through the same phrase over and over, each time slightly softer, slightly slower, as if orbiting a quiet center. It turns, and turns, and turns, ending, never beginning, then fades into silence. Now, as the last note dissolves. Consider, if the paradox loops, if the race circles, if motion is not linear but spiral, then where are we now? Not at the end, not at the beginning, but in the middle of a question that never closes. And perhaps that is where we were meant to be. Not with answers, but with wonder, not with resolution, but with openness, because the deepest truths do not give us certainty, they give us silence, they give us space, they give us a moment infinitely divisible, infinitely precious, where we can simply be with the mystery. And so, as we drift toward the final segment, let us not seek closure, let us rest in the circle, in the return, in the quiet knowing that some questions are not meant to be answered, they are meant to be lived, to be walked, to be breathed, and in that walking, we come full circle, not to the start, but to the beginning, a beginning that never began and never ends. Achilles runs, the tortoise crawls, The sun arcs across the sky, silent and slow. Dust rises in soft spirals from the earth beneath swift feet and deliberate claws. The distance between them narrows fractionally, inevitably. Half, then half again. Then half of that. The moments stretch, not in time, but in meaning. Each step echoes not just across the field, but through the corridors of thought, through centuries of wonder, through the quiet chambers of the mind. And yet after all we have explored, after infinite divisions, after relativity and quantum leaps, after stillness and mathematics and the block of time, the paradox remains, not because it is broken, but because it is alive. Zeno's paradox was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be carried, like a lantern in the dark, not to illuminate the end of the path, but to reveal the ground beneath your feet with every step. It does not trap Achilles. It frees him from the illusion of arrival, from the tyranny of the finish line, from the belief that motion must have a purpose beyond itself. The race never ends, and that is its gift, because, in its endlessness, we are released from the need to win, from the need to complete, from the need to arrive. The paradox is not a flaw in logic, nor a riddle to be cracked with equations or physics. It is a meditation, a mirror held up to the soul, showing not what motion is, but what we fear that. We are always behind, always chasing, never quite reaching. But what if the race is not about catching up? What if it is about running, not to escape the infinite, but to dwell within it, to feel the breath rise and fall, to notice the way light shifts on the horizon, to be present in the step that is happening now, even as it dissolves into the next. In this moment, this infinitely divisible, impossibly fleeting now, there is no past, no future, no tortoise ahead, no Achilles behind. There is only movement, not as a means to an end, but as an expression of being. We have traveled far in this journey, from the ancient stadium of Ilia to the edge of space-time, from the flicker of quantum particles to the stillness of awareness. We have seen how mathematics tames infinity, how relativity warps time, how consciousness shapes perception. We have stood at the edge of the block universe, where all moments exist at once, and we have sat in meditation, where no moment matters at all, and through it all. The paradox remains, not as a contradiction, but as a companion, because some truths are not meant to be resolved. They are meant to be lived, to be breathed, to be carried gently, like a question whispered in the dark. What is motion? What is time? Who is the one who moves? And perhaps the only answer is this: you are here. Not later. Not when you understand. Not when the race is over. Now. In this breath. In this stillness. In this moment that contains all others. The race that never ends is not a curse. It is a blessing, for if it ended, so too would wonder. If motion were fully explained, if time were fully understood, if the infinite were fully grasped, then curiosity would die, and with it, the awe that makes us human. But the paradox endures it, hums beneath our thoughts, like a low frequency beneath the noise of the world. It reminds us that reality is deeper than logic, wider than science, vaster than the mind can hold. It invites us not to conquer mystery, but to rest in it. We move, we rest, we think, we dream, we wake, we sleep, and through it all, the infinite remains, not as a threat, but as a presence, not as an obstacle, but as the very fabric of existence, the space between stars, the silence between heartbeats, the gap between one thought and the next. And in that gap, where motion dissolves into stillness, where time falls into eternity, where the self blurs into awareness, there is peace. You are not behind, you are not late, you do not need to catch up, you are not Achilles, you are not the tortoise, you are the field they cross, you are the air they breathe, you are the stillness in which the race unfolds. And here, this moment, this breath, this quiet surrender is enough, not because it is perfect, not because it is complete, but because it is real, and real is enough. So, let the race continue, not on the track, not in time, but in the mind. In the breath, in the space between thoughts. Let it circle, let it spiral, let it return again and again to the same question, never answered, never dismissed, always honored. Let it remind you that you do not need to finish, you only need to be, and in being, you are whole, not in the future, not when you understand now. As the final silence settles, as the last echo of thought fades into the dark, as the body sinks into rest, and the mind releases its hold and answers, let go. Let the race go on, without you, without effort, without end. And in that release, find what Zeno, in his quiet wisdom, may have known all along. The race was never about motion. It was about stillness, not the stillness after the finish line, but the stillness before the first step, the stillness in which all things begin, the stillness in which all things rest, the stillness that is not empty but full of breath full of night, full of stars, full of the infinite. And in that stillness you are home. Fade out, silence.